I know. Oh, good. Okay, great.
I don't know where that's recording. I just pressed record. So
and Tina Berg also here tonight. Tina, if you could just type in the chat box, I can unmute you if your recording is working.
Actually, Paul, what's going to happen is this is going to record and save it to your Zoom. So it's fine. You now have a recording of it. So
Okay.
there's a lot of feedback here, so I'm going to stop muting. I'm going to mute myself and let Mr. Rodriguez start. Okay.
Okay. All right. So sorry about that interruption. Your volume was a little low. Chief.
All right. Well, is that a little bit better?
That's a little better.
I'll talk loud.
Okay.
I'm on the iPhone, so I'll do my best.
Okay, great.
All right. Well, my name is Matt Rodriguez. And first of all, Paul, thank you for the invitation to be here with you tonight. And thank you to all your colleagues for taking the time to put this forum together. There is a lot to talk about as it relates to the SEER process. You know, I've had my concerns before I even went into it, and I surely have massive concerns coming out of it. But really, this is about running for sheriff of LA County. It's a very critical position, obviously responsible for the safety of 10.5 million people. And this is unprecedented times right now. What we are seeing skyrocketing crime. We have violent crime is up about 75%. We have homicides up 75%. You have arrests by deputy sheriffs at unprecedented lows. We have people from the sheriff's department flocking to the retirement board or going off on disability in record numbers, which is a real indication of morale. The sheriff's department is literally being defunded before our eyes. I believe they've lost about 1,300, 1,400 members of the sheriff's department over the last year and a half, 2 years under the leadership of Alex Villanueva. And the purpose for that is because the Board of Supervisors has absolutely no confidence in Mr. Villanueva. There's no relationship. He blew that political capital with them long ago when he tried to bring aboard a deputy sheriff that had been fired for domestic violence. Now that deputy sheriff was very close to him because he drove him around throughout his entire campaign, literally put on tens and tens of thousands of miles on his car. And in return, the promise that he would get his job back after having literally terrorized his girlfriend. We saw that on television. So that was kind of the beginning of the end for Sheriff Villanueva and his relationship with the Board of Supervisors. But that just has continued on with the district attorney, the mayor, council members all over Los Angeles, and even up to the governor. So, you know, in my opinion, to be the sheriff of LA County, you got to have to at least exercise an ounce of diplomacy for the good of the order. So what you're seeing is a purposeful defunding of the sheriff's department, and the people suffering behind that are the members of the organization and the members of this community. The deputy sheriffs and professional staff, they're not going to be seeing any kind of a pay raise anytime soon. Critical functions are being defunded, and fringe benefit negotiations, you might as well count that out. And who's suffering? We all are. I don't see any plan from the sheriff on how to keep this community safe. The only thing I see is he's in a desperate place to maintain power and doing anything he can, to the point where he even betrayed the Democratic Party. He took their endorsement, betrayed them, and suddenly has pivoted in the middle of his tenure and become a very hardcore conservative on Fox News on a regular basis. Now, here's the question. Who really is Alex Villanueva? What is he? Is he a Democrat? Is he a Republican? Who is he? Now, as far as I'm concerned, he's the one that politicized this race. Nobody in the history of the sheriff's department used to even claim their status as Republican, Democrat. The Democrats were not even interested in the sheriff's race for many years, but now they very much so are. And I don't blame them because they got burned by Alex Villanueva. So here's the point. I don't blame him for taking the stance on the side of deputy sheriffs and protecting them, but he's done it to their own detriment. It's almost like letting your kid have so much freedom, you let him play in the street to his own detriment. So there's time for change. And Matt Rodriguez is that change. 32 years in government, many, many positions, rose to the rank of captain, stood up to Lee Baca during his corruption, and have had a very post-sheriff's department, successful post-sheriff's department career. I'm happy to talk about leadership, corruption, and accountability and everything else. So I look forward to this this debate or this forum tonight, Paul, and I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Rodriguez. I and my timekeeper forgot to set the timer. I think that was about 4 minutes.
Okay, I didn't bring a timer. My bad.
Be a little more flexible with the opening statements, obviously, to be fair here. Eric, you have about 4, maybe 5 minutes. I won't cut you off, but put the timer on, and I think 5 will be the absolute max. Or Melissa, my other timekeeper, if you could put him on 5 minutes, and if you finish by then, that'll be fine, Eric. Lieutenant, I'm sorry, yes, Lieutenant Strong would be up next. Are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can, yes, and we can see you now. Great. Okay, take it away.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Paul. And Eric is fine. I'm just a normal everyday person. So I appreciate you putting this together, and I'm happy to be here. You know, what I want to talk about today is people in the community. You know, I've been in law enforcement for 29 years. I've been with the Sheriff's Department for 21 of those. So I have three other agencies underneath me. And what I think is important, what I've seen in the Sheriff's Department is nothing like what I've seen working for other agencies. The Sheriff's Department is very unique in its culture and in its mindset. And it starts very, very early on when deputies come on. I hate to say it this way, but it's almost incestuous where, you know, everything is kept inside. It's kept close sealed. It's just kept, you know, we stay to ourselves and we don't share. So what that really creates is a big us versus them mentality within the Sheriff's Department. Having worked many assignments, I've covered the spectrum between patrol, custody, courts, internal affairs. I've been a unit commander over several bureaus. And I've seen the internal workings. I've seen the decision-making processes that go on. I've seen how they come to conclusions where it reflects a lack of accountability with deputy misconduct, with shootings, with uses of force, and even just some basic citizen complaints. What we need to do is we need to start treating every person that we come in contact, whether they be in our custody in one of our jails, or whether they are out on the street, like it's ourself or our family, how we want to be treated. And that is something that has never been the message for the over 2 decades that I've been on this department internally. That may be what people go to the podium and say, but internally, the leadership does not give the message about treating people with kindness, compassion, and respect. Growing up here in LA County, I've been profiled by law enforcement. I've been roughed up by law enforcement. I have family members that have been incarcerated, who have suffered from addictions, homelessness. I have family members, both my wife and I, who have been victims of violent crime. I even have a family member that was killed by law enforcement. And what I know is the problem is that I bring a 360-degree perspective to this solution. I know what it feels like to be on the other side, and I know what it looks like to do the job right with compassion and caring and consideration for everybody that we come in contact with. I have patrolled some of the most violent, crime-filled neighborhoods in the country. I've also been in patrol in some of the most affluent neighborhoods in the country. And what I learned is that you can patrol each area the same way. You can treat people with compassion and caring and empathy. The other thing I'm not afraid of is oversight. I feel like if we're doing what we're supposed to do when we're supposed to do it, we don't care who's looking. You won't need a subpoena in order for me to go and sit down and have a conversation with those people that are just asking questions, that want to know what's going on. I can tell you that in law enforcement, in my 29 years, there's very little in law enforcement that is top secret, very little. So transparency shouldn't be a problem. We can open up our doors. We can open up our conversations. We can build community relations. And that is something that the Sheriff's Department has been suffering from a very, very long time. I'm here to tell you, I have the experience, the education, the knowledge to do the job. What we need is a leader that cares, and not a leader that simply cares about, keeping his own department to himself and huddling everybody in and not being able to share with everybody else and can't play nice in the sandbox. We need a person that's able to get out there and build relationships, not only with our elected officials, but with our various communities and get down to the ground level. And that message needs to be passed down from the very top and accountability all the way through. That's what I bring. I think all of the candidates here have great resumes. But the one thing I will tell you is that we write our own resumes. I will open up my personnel jacket and I will show it to you. I'll give you access to it. I will let you see what discipline, none, that I have in my background. What bad shootings that I have, none in my background. Complaints and so forth. And so that's some of the homework that I can encourage you to do, especially with these candidates that are on the sheriff's department or have been on the sheriff's department. Ask to see their personnel jacket, ask to see their disciplinary history. That's how we kind of dig in and get to know, and then talk to people that they've worked with and that have worked for them. That's how we get to our really doing our homework and digging into who's who. We got to just stop listening to us tell you about us. Do your homework, dig in, compassion, caring, and I want to bring a seat at the table for all different communities to come and be stakeholders, to be part of the decision making, and to help drive policy. Because guess what? It's the public that's being affected by everything that we do. So you need to have a voice. Thank you.
Just about 5 minutes. Yeah. So thank you for that, Lieutenant Strong. Next up is the sheriff himself, Alex Villanueva. Take it away.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to this group. And I do share your same concerns about transparency and the wholesomeness of the process that the LACDP uses to endorse candidates. But we are where we're at today, so let's move forward. I can tell you this, there's a real reform, and then there's people that want to be reformers. And my entire career is on the department prior to becoming sheriff. I was the one that stuck my neck out. As a deputy, I fought tooth and nail, and I got smoking banned in the county jails. As a sergeant, I challenged the corrupt practices of Lee Bach and Paul Tanaka. I also formed a rival union to the Deputies Union because they were mired in corruption back in the late 1990s when Sherman Block was still in office. So I've been pushing the issue of reform in every single rank that I've held. I did the same thing as lieutenant when I started asking questions about the McDonald regime. That led me to run for office when I retired. So I had a 32-year track record of actually accomplishing reforms. And this is something that no other candidate is going to say. And now as sheriff, I've actually followed through, and every single thing that I campaigned on that the LACDP endorsed, I can say I accomplished. And the list is very, very long. I kicked ICE out of the jails exactly like I said it was. And you cannot underestimate the significance of that. When you have 40% of LA County residents are foreign born, you have 50% Latino LA County community. And I was the first large sheriff's department in the nation to do that. And we run the nation's largest jail system. So when you kick ICE out of the county jails, that is no small undertaking. And that is in furtherance of democratic values, exactly what I campaigned on. And I found out after I was in office that the county was selling out the undocumented database to the federal immigration authorities. Yes, your board of supervisors, including the indicted Mark Ridley Thomas, the one who led the charge to call for my resignation, who has now been indicted by the feds on 20 counts of corruption. They were the ones selling out the undocumented database to ICE, while at the same time they were wrapping their arms around the shoulders of the immigrant community, telling them that they're their best friend. That is just sheer hypocrisy. Body-worn cameras, I campaigned on it, and who would have thought that I'd have to fight tooth and nail against the board, and we finally got it up and running October of 2020. Now we have all the patrol stations are now equipped with the body-worn cameras, and now we're moving into custody to put body-worn cameras, and that is the very first in the nation effort there as well. Operation Homebound, we went to the homes of people that cannot leave their home. We got them the vaccine. And we did that also with our homeless population in the riverbeds and throughout the homeless encampments. These are huge things that we're doing as an organization to serve the public because we're driven by public safety. These are important measures. And within the organization as well, we hired 1,100 deputies in 2019. How did we do that? By raising standards, by not lowering them. We cancel all out-of-state recruitment. We have the most diverse law enforcement agency of our size, anywhere near our size, in the entire nation. The Sheriff's Department diversity reflects the diversity of the county, and we have now 19% female sworn, which leads the nation. We have 50% of our sworn personnel are Latino. Again, that is huge numbers. So we reflect the diversity of the county, and that is all the way up and down the leadership ranks. Half of my division chiefs are female. That is the first time in the history of the department. So I took a sledgehammer to all those glass ceilings. So needs to say that they suffer from something they can't get by. No, now everyone can advance equally because we have equal opportunity, we have diversity, and that is the strength of the organization. Our wage theft task force, first of its kind in the nation. Angelinos lose $26 million a week in wage theft, and this impacts our low-end wage earners, a garment industry, home care workers, car washes, construction, all of that. So that wage theft task force is going to be very, very important to make it a fair employment place where everyone can work and put food on the table fairly. So we're working to do all these things. What we have to do, though, is the LA County Democratic Party tent has to be a big tent. It cannot be the far, far left to the exclusion of the moderates, the JFK crowd, the FDR crowd. If you're saying that the tent is too small for that group, well, I think we need to pay attention to what the rest of the nation is saying. And I'm here to stay.
Okay, I believe that was right on the dot of like 5 minutes. So thank you, Mr. Sheriff. I'll begin the questioning with you with the first question, and we'll continue, reversing the order. You implied it in your opening statement, more than implied it, but you didn't use the term that you've been using lately, which is woke left. As you can see, I'm a Bernie-crat, and you know that. We endorsed you with Feel the Burn LA. We were, I think, one of your first endorsements, maybe your biggest at the time, back in 2018. Like you, I'm a hybrid, right? I'm half and half. I'm half Chicano, half Latino, and half white. I chose at UCLA to major in Chicano studies, Chicana and Chicano studies, as it was known, and still is known then, and maybe one of these days it will change to Chicanx studies. I took lots of classes in African American studies and Asian American studies, American Indian studies, as it was known then, and women's studies. It's now known as gender studies, LGBT studies. Am I the problem? Am I the woke left that you have been campaigning against lately, and people like me? And I'll give you 1 minute, beginning now.
I can tell you this, being woke, being progressive is definitely not a problem. What is a problem is you need to have a seat at the table. Your voice, your opinions, your perspective needs to be heard. The problem is when you occupy every single seat at the table, like the Public Safety Advisory Committee for the MTA board. The entire board is the far left, and they voted to eliminate law enforcement from the trains and the buses. That is something that riders are saying, are you nuts? You have to be kidding me. They will not step foot on these platforms anymore for fear of their life is in danger. So that is not paying attention to the audience. So yes, your voice is very important, but the people who are making all these commissions and these different committees need to have all of the opinions put together on the table, not the exclusive progressive only. That is the danger of ideology.
Okay, thank you. Just a note, as you noticed, I didn't cut Sheriff Villanueva off at the 1 minute mark. You all can finish your sentence or your thought. I'm not going to be anal retentive like that. So thank you, Mr. Sheriff. Next up, let's go to Mr. Rodriguez. Same question. The woke left, am I and my comrades the problem? Are you
a
there?
little bit about those subjects that you talk about. But you know, it doesn't matter to me what faction of the Democratic Party you are. It doesn't matter whether you're a Republican. I don't get to pick and choose how I treat people as the sheriff. I get to treat everybody with the dignity and respect that they deserve. It doesn't matter to me where you fall in the political spectrum. It doesn't matter where you're out in the socioeconomic strata, and it doesn't matter about your immigration status. Everybody in LA County gets treated with the dignity and respect that they deserve. I've been preaching since day one the policy of respect, where we treat everybody responsibly, ethically, sensibly, professionally, empathetically, civilly, and transparently. And I'd be implementing the policy of respect on day one, Monday morning at 8:01 in the morning. It doesn't matter. And it starts at the top with the sheriff on down. So that's my position on that. Woke left, conservative right, it doesn't matter to me. Everybody gets treated equally.
Okay, and also two candidates, as you can see, Melissa's been kind enough to hold up her phone. I have mine that I'm looking at. You're welcome to use yours too. But as I say, I'm not going to cut you off at a minute mid-sentence. You can certainly finish your sentence or your thought. Next up is Lieutenant Strong. Same question. Is the woke left the problem? Am I and my comrades the problem?
Hi, Paul. Absolutely not. The woke left is not the problem. We all have our voices that we need to bring to the table. And it's one thing to have a seat at the table. It's quite another to have a voice. I think what's important for us to realize is, why is the woke left where they are? What's been going on for the last 100 years that have caused people to be so progressive and call for so much change? And like I said, these are some of the things that my family have been subjected to for decades. So what we really need to do is really be able to get down to the root causes of where we are. And when we start looking at that, then we could start coming up with solutions. Then we could start coming up with the ability to have an understanding. And I think that's part of the problem. Nobody wants to understand or hear any other side. Everybody wants to be right. When I say right, I mean, they just want to be the right one, or the correct one is a better way to say it. So no, you're absolutely not the problem. People like you are absolutely not the problem. And I think the way that we've been doing things for decades has been showing it's not working. We're right here where we've been even 30 years ago when we had the Rodney King incident. So I can't emphasize enough. No, you're not the problem.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, now we will start with you, Mr. Strong, and then we will move to Lieutenant Strong, Sheriff Villanueva, and Chief Rodriguez for the next question, which is, since this is a Democratic Party endorsement consideration forum, why are you a Democrat? 1 minute.
I'm a Democrat because I believe in the policies. I believe in the philosophies. I believe in democracy. I believe in helping others and putting forth an effort to where everybody can feel collectively like they have a voice and that they are supported in what's needed for basic human rights. Healthcare, housing, anti-discriminatory laws. My family are Democrats. My wife, now my grown children are Democrats. And, it's just something that I was raised to fully believe in and to fully support.
Okay, thank you. Next up, Sheriff Villanueva.
Sorry about that. I'm the only candidate, period, that is a lifelong Democrat. Some may try to claim they are, but we have all the registration records. I'm the only one. And that is since I've been old enough to vote. It turns out I'm also a 20-year member of the Sierra Club, and now I'm a lifelong member of the Sierra Club. So the values of the Democratic Party, fighting for the little guy, working against the corporate America trying to dominate and control all aspects of government, that is something that interests me. And I've always been pushing to represent the little guy. The oppressed against the oppressor, for example, which draw me towards law enforcement. And so this has been what I've been my entire life. I have all the records to show it, and I would love to have everyone else show what their registration records are.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sheriff. Did we get Mr. Rodriguez? No. Please, Matt, take it away.
Yeah, Paul, I got into law enforcement, which is public service. And I got into it so I could serve people and actually govern from a place of love. So I'm a Democrat because I actually believe in people. And I believe that sometimes the government has to step in and help people out who are unable to help themselves. Now, you could be a Democrat for life or a Democrat in name only, but I don't see too many Democrats on Fox News, preaching, giving out concealed weapons, on a regular basis in exchange for campaign donations, or, issuing cowboy hats to Caucasian deputies who are pointing rifles at people of color. That just doesn't add up. That's not how I govern. I govern from a place of love.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chief. Okay, next question here. We'll begin with you, Mr. Chief Rodriguez again. This is, what is your political party history? In other words, when did you become a Democrat? What, if any, other parties did you belong to? For how long? What years? If you could trace that for us.
Yeah, I'll make it very clear for you. I was an independent for as long as I could remember, going back to the Ross Perot days. For the most part, as a young man, I was apolitical. And I was even apolitical throughout most of my career because, like I said earlier, I just serve everybody at face value based on them being a human being. About 2 years ago, when Donald Trump polarized this country through politics, I thought that it was shameful, some of the things that I was seeing. I decided to take a stand. I registered as a Democrat. That was before I made any decision to run for sheriff, because I thought that Alex Villanueva had an opportunity of a lifetime to serve people and serve them correctly. So I had no indication of running for sheriff back then. I just took a stance against Donald Trump.
Okay, thank you, Chief Rodriguez. And Mr. Strong, Lieutenant Strong.
Yeah, I need to point out to the fact that, what Sheriff Villanueva pointed out is an absolute lie. He's not the only lifelong Democrat, and the documented, or I'm sorry, the doctored up false records that his campaign manager put out after I received an endorsement are absolutely false. First of all, in 1986, I wasn't even old enough to vote. I noticed that the signature is covered, and a lot of the same things that are on that particular doctored document are the same things that he put out about Cecil Rhambo. So it should be noted that I am a lifelong Democrat, like I said, as my parents, as my wife, as my adult children. It's a shame that when you're a threat, you're a target. And as soon as I got that endorsement, they felt like they needed to somehow fabricate some false information about me. But yeah, I just will tell you this, that yes, I am a Democrat since my time being able to vote.
All right, thank you, Lieutenant Strong. Next question here, we will begin, or no, wait, did we get to Sheriff Villanueva? No, we didn't. Sheriff Villanueva, please, same question about your political party history. I don't think we've heard from you yet on this question.
Well, my political party history is real simple. It's been Democrat since I was old enough to vote. And unlike the professions of people here making claims, our records speak for themselves. The county registrar recorders documents speak for themselves. We have no reason to believe anything has been altered. So that's going to be up to the candidate to prove otherwise. I can tell you this, I grew up and I became 18 in Puerto Rico, a US territory. Couldn't vote for president. We could only vote in the primaries. I registered as Democrat back then, and in LA County, I continued registering as a Democrat. So that's my entire life history as a Democrat, and I've voted in every single primary that I'm aware of. And I've had, well, we've won some, we've lost some, but I've always stuck to supporting the democratically endorsed candidate. And now it's amusing to see what that means, but all the contortions of candidates, but it's political season. What can we expect?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sheriff. Okay, next question. We'll begin also with you, Mr. Sheriff, on this one. Trying to, again, mix up the order, keep it as consistent as I can. Have you, oh, this is definitely a question for you. Have you ever been an honoree? This is a yes or no question. We're moving into some yes or no's. If you cooperate with me on that. Yes or no, have you ever been an honoree or guest speaker at any Republican Party event?
I've been a guest to a Republican Christmas dinner.
Right, that's the one that this question is speaking to.
But do remember, though, I'm the sheriff of all 10 million residents, not to the ones that are only registered Democrats.
Okay, all right, thank you. Let's go to Chief Rodriguez on that question. Have you ever headlined or been a guest speaker or guest of honor at a Republican Party event?
I have not, and I've never lit their Christmas tree either.
Okay, and Lieutenant Strong, same question.
No.
No, okay, very good. Yes or no, we will go to this. Let me get my order right here. SVR, we will start with you, Lieutenant Strong. Have you ever missed, this is a yes or no question, voting in an election?
You know, that's a good question. Going back to my voting history, I've always made sure to vote. There was a time when I was in boot camp, and I know that we had voting done there while at boot camp, but no, I can't imagine a time when I've missed a vote.
Okay, same question, Mr. Sheriff.
The same thing. Pretty sure when I transferred from Puerto Rico via Air Force boot camp to California, probably didn't catch an election or two in that process, but once here, yeah.
Okay, yeah, it happens. Chief Rodriguez.
You know, I'd have to just guess on that one, and I'd say yes, I've missed elections.
Okay, and now moving to RSV. So we will go with you at the start again, Chief Rodriguez. How often do you vote in elections? Is it, as you say, like often that you miss? Is it sometimes? Do you?
Oh, now it's often. I vote every election now as you know, middle-aged man.
Okay, and I think the others of you answered this, so we can skip the rest of that. We'll go and start with Lieutenant Strong here. Okay, when you vote, Lieutenant Strong, do you vote in all the races for all the propositions? Do you pick and choose the biggest races? Do you also vote in the smaller local races? Lieutenant Strong?
I think he might have had some internet issues, 'cause I don't think he's on.
Okay, hopefully we get him right back. Let's go to Sheriff Villanueva on that question. Do you vote in all the races, contests? Do you do your homework on the races, or do you kind of just focus on a few and leave the rest blank?
No, probably at least over the last decade. I've voted every local race, every primary, and every general election on the gubernatorial and the presidentials.
Okay, thank you. And Chief Rodriguez.
I do vote on all the propositions and on all the judges and everybody else that's on the ballot. It actually almost becomes like a family research project.
Yes, it does. Okay. And
Eric Strong is back.
okay, great. Lieutenant Strong, the question, I don't know if you heard it, is when you vote, do you vote all the races? Do you pick and choose? Do you vote in just the big ones or the small ones too?
You know, I can tell you that I have not always been a hypervigilant voter in a lot of the smaller elections. I always very proudly wear my I voted sticker for most of the major ones. You know, as I've gotten older and I've learned the importance of my particular vote and the importance of even some of the smaller elections, yeah, my voter productivity has definitely increased. But I can tell you at a younger age, I probably wasn't as high propensity as I should have been.
Okay. All right. Moving on to national politics. Can you recall, this will go to, let me get my order here straight. We will start with Mr. Rodriguez, Chief Rodriguez. Let me find this question again, sorry. Yes, the presidential candidates that you voted for, over the years as an adult? If you could list them off, if you recall them.
I voted for Joe Biden. I voted for Donald Trump when, he's talking about cleaning the swamp. And, I thought that was an interesting rhetoric. I voted for Obama. And, going back, I can't really, I think Ronald Reagan, if I was old enough then, I think I was. I really couldn't go too much more into the history. I don't recall.
Okay. And Lieutenant Strong?
Yes, so I definitely voted for Biden. Definitely have voted for Obama, never voted for Trump. Voted for Clinton. I stayed Democratic all the way through, back to whenever I can remember voting in a presidential election.
Okay. And Sheriff Villanueva?
Yes, I voted for Biden. I voted for Clinton. I voted for Obama. I voted for Al Gore, and that pained me a lot to see that one lost. And I voted all the way down presidential Dem.
Okay, thank you. And next question. I think I got the order a little mixed up, so pardon me. Let's start with Sheriff Villanueva on state races here. Can you recall the people who voted for governor since becoming an adult?
Who I voted for governor since becoming adult?
Yeah. If you could trace that history for us, if you can recall.
I remember voting for Gray Davis. I remember voting for Brown. I remember voting for Gavin, and who's occupying the current office. And before Gray Davis, I can't remember who was.
And did you vote in the recall election?
The current recall election? Yes, I did.
And did you vote to recall or retain Governor Newsom?
How's that?
Did you vote to recall or retain Governor Newsom?
I voted to recall.
Okay, and your replacement was?
How's that?
Your replacement candidate was whom?
I didn't pick a replacement candidate.
Okay, interesting. Okay, and same question, Chief Rodriguez, the governorship. If you can recall who you voted for years.
Well, I remember voting for Newsom, and I remember Gray Davis, and then there was a recall. I remember voting for Schwarzenegger when I thought it was time for change.
Okay, and recent recall election, did you vote to recall or retain Governor Newsom?
I did not vote to recall, and I did not take any pictures with Larry Elder either.
Okay, and you didn't pick a the replacement. You didn't vote to recall.
No, sir, I did not.
Eric Strong, I see you may be having some technical difficulties. Are you with us still?
I'm here.
Okay, great. The question was, the governors, since you become an adult, if you could kind of get that history.
Yeah, I did vote for Newsom, and I can tell you that I've voted Democrat in any of the governor elections that I participated in, and I did vote in the recall, and I voted for a no recall against Newsom.
Okay, great. Okay, next question. I believe we will go back to SBR. Mr. Lieutenant Strong. We'll start off with you here. Attorney General races. Can you recall the Attorney Generals voted for or against since becoming an adult?
I honestly cannot recall who I voted for, but I can tell you that anytime that there's a ballot, I voted on the Democratic ballot, on the Democratic platform.
Okay, so people like Kamala Harris, of course, was our Attorney General. Jerry Brown was our Attorney General.
Yes.
Okay, so you've been voting straight Democratic ticket, you're saying?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Of course, yeah, Kamala Harris and excuse me, Brown. I'm just trying to remember going back.
Yeah.
It wasn't something that I memorized.
Okay.
But it's been a Democratic ticket.
Okay, and Sheriff Villanueva, Attorney General races. If you could take that history a little bit for us.
Yes, I've been voting the Democratic ticket from Xavier Becerra all the way back, as far as I remember.
Okay. And Chief Rodriguez?
I don't recall who I voted for in the Attorney General race. I'm hopeful, Paul, that you're gonna work your way down to this local Democrat process, right? Is that where we're heading?
We are.
Thank you.
That's where
Okay.
we're going next. And you are the first up in this round. So let's go to you for this question. Local races. Can you recall the people you voted for district attorney since becoming an adult?
I would have voted for Jackie Lacey.
Okay. And what about before that? Support him?
No, I wouldn't recall.
Okay. Bill Garcetti?
Yeah, I remember I was a Garcetti fan back in the day, yes.
Okay. And
Maybe
Lieutenant,
even Steve Cooley.
okay. Lieutenant Strong?
I'm gonna say the same, although I believe I voted for Gascon this last race. And to be honest with you, that was a very contentious process. And then Garcetti, and then I believe Cooley.
Okay, yeah, in fact, let me go back to Chief Rodriguez on that. The most recent district attorney elected, of course, was George Gascon. Did you vote for, or you said Lacey, right? You said,
I believe I voted for Jackie Lacey.
so I got that straight. Okay. And Sheriff Villanueva, same question?
Yes, I voted for Lacey. I voted for Cooley before him, Gil Garcetti, Ira Reiner, if you remember him from way back in the day.
Yeah.
And I don't think I'm old enough for Philibosian, but that's as far as I can remember.
Okay, okay. And let's get the order right here again. I believe we will start again with you, Sheriff Villanueva, on this question of George Gascon. What are your views on the criminal justice reforms pursued by District Attorney Gascon? You'll have a minute.
Gascon's reforms have been an absolute disaster for public safety for LA County. It is leading to violent criminals not being prosecuted as they should be, and or coming out as quickly as possible back onto the street. The zero bail schedule is doing so. Just look no further than the 10-year-old girl who was sexually assaulted in a Denny's restaurant, and that happened when the suspect was 2 weeks shy of being 18 years old. Now that person is not going to face the consequences of assaulting a 10-year-old girl. Look at how many cases are just like that. They're coming to light, and that is not public safety. We can reform the criminal justice system responsibly, but there has to be a collaborative effort with everybody. You cannot be the DA and come down the mountains like Moses with a tablet and say, this is the reform, take it or take it. And he failed to do that. And by failing to do that, he's not enlisted the support of his own folks. I have 12,000 DA rejects in his first year in office. That is unconscionable. That's not public safety.
Okay.
And that's not reform.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sheriff. And Chief Rodriguez, same question. Your views on the reform policies initiated by DA Gascon.
Well, I don't think these reform policies make any sense whatsoever. You know, when I first got into this race, I did my best to try to stay out of that recall business. But, you know, after watching people in Beverly Hills get murdered in their own homes, and I'm seeing cases not being filed, quality of life cases not being filed, no opportunity for drug addicts to enter into diversion programs because they're not being, prosecuted. The whole premise of Prop 47 is they were going to decriminalize, drug offenses and get these offenders into programs. So no, I don't support George Gascon, and I believe that George Gascon needs to be recalled.
Okay, Chief Rodriguez, thank you for your comments. And let's now go to the next question, which is going to bring things down to the sheriff level. And let's go with.
Wait, did everybody answer that question?
Oh, wait, did we get Lieutenant Strong? We missed you, sorry. George Gascon and your views on the criminal justice reforms initiated by him.
I feel like criminal justice reforms are much needed. However, I do not agree with blanket policies that just cover everything. I think there needs to be some balance. That balance needs to look like a lot of times where the suspects that we're seeing in many of these crimes come from the same neighborhoods and sometimes the same homes as the victims. So have we had a over criminalization and incarceration of Black and Latinos over the decades? Yes, we have. Does that need to be corrected? Yes, it does. However, I think it needs to be corrected on an individual basis. I don't think it needs to be a blanket policy where there's no enhancements or we're just letting anybody and everybody out of the jails. So to say whether I agree with his reform policies as a whole, no, but I do see the need for many of them in order to correct some of the wrongful incarcerations that we have seen for decades. Those things right there need to be addressed.
Okay, thank you, Lieutenant Strong. Next question is about the sheriff. And can you recall the people you've supported for sheriff? We have one in the room, obviously, tonight. Did you vote for Sheriff Villanueva? And can you recall other sheriffs past?
Is that for me?
Yes.
Okay, no, I'll be honest with you. I definitely did not vote for Alex Villanueva. And in the past, I probably voted for Baca, but I don't honestly recall.
Okay, so you would have voted then for then Sheriff Jim McDonnell in 2018?
Yes.
Okay. And Sheriff Villanueva, I think this is an easy one for you in your race, but prior to that, sheriff candidates that you voted for?
Yes, I definitely obviously voted for myself when I voted for Baum Olmsted back in 2014. Obviously did not support Paul Tanaka, nor did I support the Republican Jim McDonnell. I voted for Ray Leva going back, I think it was 2006 when there was a campaign. I think 2010 there was no race for sheriff because no one ran against the incumbent. And I voted for Baca back in '98 over Block. And prior to that, I think I voted for Block.
Okay. Chief Rodriguez.
For Jim McDonnell. And prior to that, it was, I voted for, I was a long time supporter of Lee Baca before he went corrupt. And then prior to that, I voted for Sherman Block.
Okay. All right. Next question. Let's go to I believe it's the RSV now. We'll start with you, Chief Rodriguez. Do you support, this is a yes or no question, SB 271, which would eliminate the requirement for candidates for sheriff in California to be current or former law enforcement within the past 5 years?
I do not support that.
Okay, you do not support that. And Lieutenant Strong?
No.
Okay, and Sheriff Villanueva?
I do not support that.
Okay, great. Let's start with you, Sheriff Villanueva. And the next question is support in California state law to have sheriffs be appointed and fireable by county boards of supervisors.
Well, considering the fact that one of the last heads of the board of supervisors has a 20-count federal indictment, do I want someone of that caliber appointing sheriffs? Oh, hell no. Remember, this is about checks and balances. The board of supervisors is both the executive and the legislative branch of county government. They have no oversight. They have no inspector general. They have nothing other than the sheriff and the DA to be a check and balance in county government. The last thing in the world we need is eliminate the one remaining check and balance that exists. No, the sheriff needs to remain independent of the board always and act directly on behalf of the people, which is what I'm doing. That's why LA City didn't burn down, or the county of LA didn't burn down during the riots. But the place that had appointed chiefs of police, they had a lot of trouble because they had to ask for permission to do their job. That was a big difference in the success of the areas that we covered.
Okay, and Chief Rodriguez, do you support a change in state law to have sheriffs be appointed and fired?
I do not support that. And, you know, the sheriff took the words out of my mouth, actually, just to show you that I'm fair and balanced. During the riots, there was one entity that was handling business in the community and keeping the community safe. And that was the sheriff's department under Villanueva's leadership, because he's the only one that could do the right thing. And he was unbridled, as opposed to what you saw with LAPD's chief and some of the other municipal chiefs who, were fearful of their jobs while their radio cars were getting burned in the street. So yeah, the sheriff's right, and I agree with him on that.
Okay, and Lieutenant Strong.
Yeah, Paul, I'm going to use my minute to go back just a little bit, because these yes or no questions, I think, need a little bit of an explanation.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so I just want to be clear that me not voting for Alex Villanueva did have nothing to do with being a Democrat or Republican. It had to do with knowing him for over 15 years and knowing exactly who he is and what his character is, and I would never vote for him. That's number one. Number two, as far as appointing or a law that passes where, should somebody have 5 years of law enforcement, or I think the way that was worded, again, I think it goes back to balance. We wouldn't do that for doctors or surgeons to have somebody else overseeing what they do. And in terms of the last question, I look at it like this. Appointed law enforcement officers are all over the country as chiefs of police. And to be honest with you, nothing has really changed when you look at law enforcement as a whole, some of the things that we're seeing nationwide. So I don't believe it's an appointment issue, because when you're appointed, then you're subject to the whims of whoever the city council and the city manager or the board of supervisors is at the time. So I would not agree to have the sheriff in an appointed position.
Okay.
I think they are beholden to the people that put them in office.
Okay, and you get the next question, which is kind of an inverse of the last question. Do you support a change in state law then to have city police chiefs be elected?
I've never really honestly considered that. I guess that would be on a level of local elections. It could change things. Again, they could be beholden to the people that they serve. I'd have to think about it, honestly. Never really even considered it. Okay,
Sheriff Villanueva?
I'd be inclined to say I wouldn't support that, only because we have, I think, 470 odd police departments in our state. And given a lot of the issues of local corruption at the city level, look what happened with the city of Bell, for example. In a lot of these places where you have a corrupt local government appointing or with the elected chief of police, I don't know. It sounds like it's a recipe for bigger problems, or the solution is not equal to the size of the problem.
Okay, and Chief Rodriguez.
That's sort of a law at all. I've worked in municipal cities. I've seen incompetent council people that are popular in the community, rise to levels of mayor, and they're completely incompetent and incapable of managing budgets or anything like that. So under that premise or theory, you could, have the local daycare worker who's popular and who's babysit everybody's kids now rises to the level of chief of police. So that's a disaster. No, I wouldn't go for that.
Okay. And we'll start with you on this next question. It is, what type of change is needed for the sheriff's department? Abolish and defund, a complete transformation, major reform, incremental reform, or just continuing along with the path that we're currently on, basically? Chief Rodriguez.
The sheriff's department needs to start with the sheriff, and we need to restore some decorum, some dignity and respect back to the office of sheriff. That way we can work in the spirit of cooperation and start to get things done. It really does start at the top. When the deputies see the sheriff, hiding behind subpoenas, not talking about tough issues, then they act accordingly. So, but I've been preaching along the trail that, modern law enforcement in modern society needs to change. Our profession has actually gone backwards. We suffered from the same things under George Floyd that we suffered nearly 30 years ago from under Rodney King. tragedy. So we have work to do. So we do need to reform, and that's taking law enforcement, what I say, from a gladiator mentality down to a guardian mentality, where we're less enforcers of the law and we're more peacekeepers in the community.
Okay, and Lieutenant Strong?
Yeah, I think that the sheriff's department needs to be absolutely turned upside down, shaken up, and completely redone from the very top down. Here's the real deal. On the inside of the department, it's divided. Station to station, jail to jail, floor to floor. If we're divided on the inside, how do we really expect that the people that we're dealing with will be treated fairly and with respect? Secondly, there's a huge problem with the promotional process within the sheriff's department. It's basically a tap on the shoulder. Anything into the executive ranks. The sheriff comes to you and says, hey, you deliver my message my way, when I tell you to, how I tell you to, where I tell you to, and I'll promote you. And if you do it good for me for a couple of years, I'll promote you again. There is no legitimate, grievable process for promotion into the executive ranks. And so what a lot of people do is they get quiet because they want that path to better living. We've seen it time and time again with our current sheriff, the people that he's promoted. He sets qualifications, but then the people that he wants don't have to abide by it. So we need a huge, drastic overhaul within the sheriff's department from the very top down, principles, policies, and leadership. Okay,
thank you, Lieutenant Strong. Okay, and did I get everybody there? No, Sheriff Villanueva. Same question.
Well, this is pretty simple, really. You're hearing a lot of empty rhetoric with no specifics. Kind of like the old Sarah Purcell commercial, where's the beef? And when I came into office, I delivered reform, body-worn cameras, our entire contents of the department. Now you can access online at lasd.org. There's a transparency tab that has everything you've never seen before. That is transparency. When my executive team is a reflection of the diversity of the entire county, and there's no longer the good old boy system. That's what happened in the past. And Lieutenant Strong there was describing the Lee Baca Paul Tanaka years to a T, because if you were not in the car, you did not exist. And now to become a captain on the department, you have to compete. You have to have the education. You have to have the time serving the community. And the community is the one that votes on who becomes a patrol station. So the city, the leadership of the city does so. And if lieutenants are unfamiliar with this process, well, that's more a reflection of their lack of preparation than anything else.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sheriff. You'll take the start of this next question, which is, do you believe in reducing police and sheriff budgets and reallocating those monies to social work, domestic community violence prevention, poverty alleviation, education, parks and rec, job training, mental health, addiction, and other such programs? 1 minute.
This is pretty simple. We're the most understaffed law enforcement agency in the nation, 0.9 deputies per 1,000 residents. LAPD has 2.2, NYPD has 4.0. You want to tell me to drop it even further below the 0.9 deputies per 1,000 residents? Everything you mentioned is very noble and good ideas for county government, but it cannot come at the expense of dismantling our public safety work or net. That is irresponsible. And that is definitely, look, I've already lost 1,281 positions due to defunding. I was defunded 2 years in a row, $145 million 1 year, $116 million years the next. Measure J, which was a defunding measure, was declared unconstitutional by the courts. And you're not going to achieve that. That is something, again, that goes to an ideal on the far left to cannibalize law enforcement budget to fund those things. They need to be funded, but you need to leave the budget of law enforcement intact because safety is number one. You can't thrive without safety.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sheriff. And next one on this question is Chief Rodriguez.
I think having a meaningful dialogue and as it relates to the budget is fine. If somebody asks me if I'm willing to relinquish part of my budget to deal with the mentally ill that are housed in my county jail, I would say yes. If you're willing to take my inmates from the county jail into your mental hospital to care for them so I could free up my deputies to do other work, then absolutely, I'd be interested in talking about what I call reallocation of resources. I don't need to go to that same call of the mentally ill person on the corner 5,000 times a year. Let's send a mental health practitioner there. And if you need part of my budget to do that, then let's talk about, do that, balanced and fair and equitable. So yeah, I'm open to meaningful dialogue in that area. Yes.
Okay, and Lieutenant Strong?
Yes, absolutely. I am very open to that form of dialogue. I think the sheriff said there's 1.9 to every 1,000 residents. I don't think he has that right. It's probably 1.9 to every 10,000 as far as the ratio. And that is something where if you can free up deputy sheriffs from doing some of the social work and taking care of some of the mental health issues, and you can put the proper people that are properly trained and properly equipped to handle those ratios will be better served, because then we will be out there doing providing protection and providing security for our citizens and doing some of the things that we are basically designed to do. So absolutely, I have no problem with taking some of that budget. There's a lot of waste in the sheriff's department. There's a lot of room for doing things a lot better, where we can cinch our belt down a little bit more to help the community overall, which is what's sorely needed.
Okay, thank you, Lieutenant Strong. And next question here is a multi-part question. It's about, or wait, no, actually the next question, sorry, it's not the multi-part question. I skipped here. We are going to go starting with you, Lieutenant Strong, and the question is, let's combine these two questions. In your opinion, are corporations people and is money speech?
The last part was, is money a speech?
In your opinion, yeah, these are really yes, no question. In your opinion, are corporations people and is money speech?
I don't think corporations, when they consider the bottom dollar as people, obviously they're comprised of people that make the decisions. But no, I don't see them as people when the whole premise for them to exist is about money. And yes, is money a speech? Yeah, money talks in a lot of, and I hope I'm getting the gist of your question, but yes, money talks, and unfortunately, money dictates a lot of things. I mean, we see it even in right now, the viability of a candidate is determined how much money they can raise, and it's not determined about what they want to do, about their plans, about the changes that they want to make. So I think if I'm getting the gist of your question, then I would say yes.
Okay, if you need a minute, Sheriff or Chief, you can take it. In your opinion, are corporations people and is money speech? Sheriff Villanueva?
Well, I'll tell you, that's no and no. That's the Citizens United decision from the Supreme Court a few years back, and I disagree with that decision. That allowed for a lot of the dark money to enter into politics and the super PACs that really is tilted everything in favor of corporate candidates that act at the best beck and call of corporations. Look at Congress. You should have every single congressperson, every Congress and senator armed with a jacket, just like NASCAR, where they have all their different logos of who sponsors them, because that's what they're doing. They act on their behest. And so I disagree with that decision. I believe a firm no and no on both. And however, this is where we're at today.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sheriff. And Chief Rodriguez. Are corporations people and is money speech?
Your question is, sort of up for interpretation. I'm not sure they even understand.
Yeah, it is.
So here's what I'll say. No, I don't believe that corporations are people. And yes, I believe money is speech. They say that people who have money write the history books. And I subscribe to that theory.
Okay. We'll start with you on this next question. Do you believe endorsements and political contributions from for-profit business entities, their related PACs, political action committees, and their business lobbyists gives rise to corruption, or at least the appearance of corruption? This is a yes or no question.
Absolutely, it does.
Okay.
You have people who, special interests that are able to buy their way into the politics. If you got money and you're willing to give to the campaign, then, I'll give you a concealed weapons permit.
Okay, and Lieutenant Strong, same question.
Yeah, that's a short answer. Absolutely, no doubt.
Okay, and Sheriff Villanueva?
I believe money does corrupt politics for sure, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So I definitely, prime example, look at an obscure candidate for the Assembly, State Senate, Congress, comes out of nowhere. And within a year, they've raised $5 million, $10 million. How do they do that? Because they're going to sell their seat to the highest bidder. That's how there's definitely a quid pro quo there, but it's legalized bribery.
Okay. And you take the start of the answering on this question. The next one is, do you support, again, this is really yes, no, the public financing of all political campaigns for public office, either through direct funding or public matching funds or campaign vouchers, also known as democracy dollars, etc.?
I'd be interested to see how that pans out and how that pencils out on paper in terms of the budget for whatever government is overseeing that election that allows for the public. But anything that levels the playing field, so John Q. Citizen can compete against someone who was born a billionaire, for example, and they can compete on a level playing field, if that could ever be possible. That's an intriguing idea.
Okay, and same question, Chief Rodriguez. Do you support the public financing of all political campaigns for public office through various means?
I think that'd be fair. If everybody has a level playing field and equal amount of money to get their message across, then let the best man win.
Okay, and Lieutenant Strong.
Hold on, I think he might have switched devices. Here we go.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're okay, great.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry for all these technical difficulties. Can you repeat the question for me, please?
Sure. It is, do you support the public financing of all political campaigns for public office, either through direct funding, public matching funds, campaign vouchers, also known as democracy dollars, etc.?
I think that would probably be the best bet. You give every candidate the same amount of money, and you let who they are speak to whether they're the right candidate or not.
Okay. All right, and you will take the start of this next question, which is the multi-parter I was referring to earlier. And so I'll ask you about several different things here, and hopefully we can get this done in a minute per candidate. Are you, is your campaign seeking or accepting endorsements and or campaign contributions, or might it in the months ahead, from any of the following: for-profit business entities or their lobbyists, Lieutenant Strong?
No.
Okay, business trade associations and their PACs, corporate PACs, business-focused dominated PACs?
And when you say trade, are we talking unions or labor?
Not yet. No, we'll get to that. These are
Okay.
business trade associations.
No.
Okay. And what about private contractors, individuals, businesses, or their agents who have past, present, or potentially future contracts with the Sheriff's Department?
No.
Private prison companies, their executives, PACs, lobbyists, or other agents?
No.
And here's the unions. What about police or sheriff deputy unions?
I will be participating in their forum. I have not personally reached out to them on my own accord seeking their endorsement, but I was invited, much like here, and I will be participating in their forum.
Okay, and so you would accept their endorsement and or campaign contributions?
You know, that's something, honestly, Paul, and I'll be honest with you, I'm brand new to this. I'd have to talk to my team about that. I do not want to be beholden to police unions, especially as the sheriff that would have to hold the membership accountable.
Okay. And prosecutor unions?
It's like, you mean as far as like the DA's office and so forth? Same thing.
Attorneys Association?
Same.
Are you going to be applying for their endorsement?
No.
Okay. And what about prison guard unions?
No.
Okay. And Sheriff Villanueva, same set of questions. We'll start from the top. Are you going to be taking endorsements or campaign money from for-profit business entities or their lobbyists?
No.
Okay. business or trade associations, their PACs, corporate PACs?
No,
Okay, private contractors with past, present, or future contracts potentially with the Sheriff's Department?
no, anybody who has a contract with the Sheriff's Department, no.
What about private prison companies, their executives, PACs, lobbyists, agents?
No, I totally disagree with the entire concept of private prisons.
Okay, and what about the sheriff, deputy unions, other police unions?
Yes,
Okay, and prosecutor unions
yes,
and prison guard unions?
yes.
Okay, and Chief Rodriguez, same set of questions. Are you taking or might you take money from for-profit business entities or their lobbyists?
I'd say no to all of them except for the deputy union, the prosecutors union, and the prison guards.
Okay,
I would accept, I have asked for the endorsement of the deputy union and the supervisors and professional staff union. There's been talk of me speaking to the prison guards, and I'm not opposed to going to talking to them as well.
okay, so you know on the private prisons, private contractors?
Yes, correct. No on all of them. Yes on the deputy union, professional staff union, and even possibly the prison guards.
Okay, all right. And next question will begin with you there, Chief Rodriguez. It is, we're moving on to COVID-19 now. So this is, let's take them as a set to save a little time. Are you fully vaccinated, Mr. Chief?
I am fully vaccinated, and I just recently, after the latest surge of the Omicron, I received my booster. It was the Thursday before New Year's.
Okay, and have you contracted COVID?
I have not had COVID, thank God.
Okay, thank goodness. Yeah, and what about a COVID vaccine mandate in the Sheriff's Department? Why or why not? And what do you think the consequences should be for anyone who refuses to get vaccinated in the department? Up to 1 minute on that.
That, for me, that's very simple. I don't tell people what to do with their body. I don't tell people what to put into their body, particularly when it comes out of a needle. So I don't mandate people to do anything with their life. If the county board of supervisors or any other entity decides to make it, county law, that it's a condition of employment to be employed by the county, you need to be vaccinated, then the employee is going to have a very difficult decision to make. They're going to have to make that decision on their own. Do they want to be vaccinated, or do they want to be employed by the county of LA, or do they want to go seek employment elsewhere? That may be their choice. As sheriff, I'll do my best to keep our deputy personnel out of interacting with the public if possible, wearing masks, tested daily, and make their life inconvenienced if that's necessary in order for them to keep their job. But no, I don't mandate people what to do with their body, period.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chief. And next one, this is Lieutenant Strong. Are you vaccinated and boosted?
Yes, I am.
And have you contracted COVID?
Yes, I have.
Okay, glad to hear. I hope you're recovering or recovered. You're not a long hauler, I hope.
No, actually, it was just over these past holidays. Both my wife and I got it, and I think it got to the vaccine. It was very mild. It felt like a cold.
Okay, good. Well, not good. Colds aren't good, but
I'm kind of glad I got it out of the way and got it over with, because I've been wondering if I had it and if I was an asymptomatic person or not. So I'm kind of glad I got it.
yeah. Okay, and then the mandate question, up to 1 minute. Do you support a COVID vaccine mandate? Why or why not? And what do you think the consequences should be for those who refuse any such mandate?
As the sheriff, it is my job to uphold the rules, the laws. I understand that a mandate is not a law. It is a rule. I do have questions about it, because the reality of it is that the vaccine does not keep you from getting COVID, as I know full well personally. So what is the purpose of having a vaccine mandate? I think it's to help protect people from dying, to help protect public health. And that's what we're supposed to do as law enforcement. We're supposed to lead by example, follow the rules. And if LA County establishes a vaccine mandate and it's gone to court, it's been tested, and it's proven to be legal, then yes, I would support that mandate. I wouldn't necessarily create it myself, but I would deliver the message to the people. I wouldn't do my employees a disservice by telling them I'm not going to hold them accountable to it. I'm not going to discipline. When we learn through Mandoyan, you know what I mean? Yeah, sure, you can give people a job, a badge, and a gun, but the county gets to determine whether or not they're going to get paid. So I would not speak against any mandates.
Okay. And Sheriff Villanueva?
Well, this is pretty simple. Wait, what was the beginning of the question?
Oh, so are you vaccinated and boosted?
Yes, I'm vaccinated and boosted for quite a while now.
Okay. And have you contracted COVID or?
Have not contracted COVID. I am definitely not going to be enforcing a vaccine mandate. I've adopted the same policy as Governor Newsom and President Biden. You either get vaccinated or you submit yourself to weekly testing. It's effective, it works, but as sheriff, you have to know your workforce. I stand to lose 1,600 employees that can walk away, no questions asked, because they're already at retirement age. So I don't have the captive audience that other county departments have. And also, Sheriff, you have to understand that you run the Sheriff's Department. You don't ask permission of the Board of Supervisors about how to run your department. That's your responsibility alone. So you have to understand your workforce, and we're doing everything possible now. We're up to 98.5% compliance with registration, and now we're lining up to weekly testing, and we're going to continue to encourage people to get vaccinated. I think over time, people will become more vaccinated, and as someone said, when you inconvenience people, ultimately they'll decide, you know, let me just get the jab and get this thing over with. But it's going to work without the mandate.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sheriff. Now, moving on to the next set of questions, we will start then with you, Sheriff Villanueva. I think it's going to be best to maybe take these in order. A lot of them are yes, no, and I suspect there's going to be a lot of, I hope there's going to be a lot of no's. But just to warn everybody, the following are difficult and perhaps painful questions, but they have to be asked. So there's your warning. Let's begin with you, Sheriff Villanueva, and go down through this list. Have you ever been accused of sexual harassment or sexual assault?
No.
Okay. Have you ever committed sexual harassment or sexual assault?
No.
Have you ever committed domestic violence?
No.
Have you ever been sued in either a personal or professional capacity?
Well, when I became sheriff, I inherited 66 wrongful termination lawsuits. So I can say as sheriff, yeah, you get sued every single day.
Right. Okay. Any other cases, though, beyond then your status as sheriff when you were a deputy or other?
No, actually not.
Okay, so you weren't sued. Have you ever been arrested?
No.
Okay. Have you ever been, well, this wouldn't apply then, charged with a crime or convicted? You haven't, if you haven't been arrested. Have you ever been formally disciplined during your career in law enforcement?
I was disciplined for I believe I received a written reprimand for a preventable TC when I was a young deputy. And twice I was disciplined under the corrupt regime of Paul Tanaka. And I got a 5-day suspension and a 10-day suspension that I had to spend $40,000 in attorney fees to get thrown out because this is part of the Paul Tanaka retaliation machine. And so those cases were thrown out because obviously they were fake. They were generated by the Tanaka regime. And so, no.
Okay. And the first one you mentioned, I didn't quite hear correctly. What was that about?
A preventable traffic collision, a fender bender.
I see. Okay. That reminds me, I want to ask a question. If I forget, guys, I want to ask about sheriff driving and the often reckless driving that I see with law enforcement. I want to add that question. But in the meantime, as we're going down here, have you ever, well, we know the answer to this now, defied a subpoena?
No. In spite of all the hoopla out there, when you have a legal dispute over the legality of a subpoena, you have to enter what's called a motion to quash. And that's the legal procedure, the exact same one that Governor Newsom did. So we're legally challenging the subpoenas issued by the Inspector General and Oversight Commission because they're politically motivated. They're political attacks. They're not a lawful request for information. We've already given them literally everything that we own. We've already handed over to the Oversight Commission and the Inspector General. More so the Inspector General because they can legally see more things than the Oversight Commission. So there's really nowhere else to go.
Okay. Have you ever been immunized before testifying?
No, I've never. I'm pretty sure you can ask that question of another candidate, however. Not in this room.
Have you ever pleaded the Fifth Amendment?
No,
Have you ever been involved in any officer-involved shootings?
no,
Have you ever engaged in any form of misconduct or crime as a member of law enforcement, even if you weren't disciplined for it?
nope,
Have you ever personally witnessed any form of misconduct or crime by law enforcement?
no,
Have you ever personally experienced any form of misconduct or crime against you by another member of law enforcement?
oh yes.
And if you could have a minute to briefly explain.
Well, there was retaliation, and that was the case I had just mentioned, those two cases when I was a sergeant and I was challenging the corrupt employment practices of undersheriff at the time, actually Division Chief Paul Tanaka. This was during his rise to power. They, when I challenged it in writing, the results of lieutenant's examination, within the week, I received not one, but two notices that I was being investigated for supposedly not doing my job as a sergeant. Both cases were false. And in fact, somebody in this chat room knows a lot about one of those false cases. And so they may have to answer some of those questions on their own. But that's probably the closest I can say that to answer your question.
Let's see. Excuse me. Have family, friends, or acquaintances of yours ever suffered any form of misconduct or crime against them by law enforcement?
Yes.
Okay, a minute to explain.
I had a brother-in-law of mine who was detained and had a gun pointed at him. He was a minor at the time, sat on the curb, and it was a very unpleasant experience.
Okay, is that it, or?
Yeah, that's it.
Have you ever used a racist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic, or other discriminatory slur or epithet as an adult?
No,
Have you ever shared via text, email, social media, or other means any racist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic, or other discriminatory content?
no,
Have you ever seen any such content shared by fellow members of law enforcement?
no,
Do you believe the law enforcement personnel record, redacted to protect medical privacy, sensitive financial info, vulnerable witnesses, and the like, of all current or past law enforcement officers running for sheriff, should be released?
That's an interesting question. Open up your personnel file. Well, there's something that's going to legally block that, and that's the Peace Officer Bill of Rights. And however, it can be waived. That's an interesting thing. I think it's possible. I don't see why not. I think it might be educational for some to see. In fact, some people have very, very lengthy records with a lot of discipline, a lot of investigations of use of force and internal affairs investigations. So that might be educational for the voter.
Okay. Do you believe in the concept of implicit bias, and do you support implicit bias training for law enforcement officers?
Yes, implicit bias training is very, very important. We have a very thorough training protocol that we've already instituted. Some of it is driven also by the state legislature has passed law regarding implicit bias. So we incorporate that in the training at the academy level, in field training officer school, patrol school for our deputies who are transitioning from custody to patrol, and our sergeants supervisory course when they become newly promoted sergeants as well. So this curriculum is reemphasized periodically throughout our employees' time on the force. And the captain college, again, is another chance that they reemphasize this.
Okay. And do you believe transgender and non-binary people should be allowed to use the bathroom of their choice?
I think they should use a bathroom that they identify with.
Okay.
And we're doing all the retrofitting now to accommodate everybody. And I think that's fine.
Okay. Have you ever been a member of or affiliated with any of the following? The Oath Keepers,
No,
a private militia group,
no,
any avowed white supremacist organization,
no,
a street gang or ethnic gang or biker gang or similar gang outside of law enforcement?
no.
Which term do you prefer and why? Clique, gang, secret society, subgroup, or something else for those sheriff department groups?
Well, to be legally honest and factual, subgroup was probably the most appropriate terminology.
Okay, and you have a minute if you want to explain that.
Well, it's pretty simple because a gang has a legal connotation. 3 more people that are united with a common symbol who are engaged in criminal conduct. And that is the big difference. People want to talk about deputy gang, but they lack they lack who they're talking about, because it's a straw man argument. Oh, there's deputy gangs on the department. Okay, who are they? Point them. Nobody can. And that's the big problem there, because we have to make employment decisions based on facts, rule of law. I inherited, whenever I mentioned I inherited 66 wrongful termination lawsuits. Some of those was a group called the Jump Out Boys back in Lee Bacchus days. They fired 7 of them. 6 of them got their jobs back through the Civil Service Commission, including one that I had to pay 9 years of back pay. 9 years of back pay because they were wrongfully terminated. And that is the fact. That's where we are today. Just like the Carl Mendoyan case. It costs millions. Wrongful termination is very expensive and a very waste of taxpayer dollars. And it also just destroys the morale of the organization. So remember this, it has to pass constitutional muster. And right now, our policy, which is the first of its kind, passes that constitutional muster, and we're acting on it. It's working. I fired 4 for it. We disciplined 22 on one case out of East LA. They've got a lot of media attention. So we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. But again, we have to have facts and evidence to make employment decisions.
Okay. Okay. The other candidates here tonight, you'll have about a minute 45 on that question. Have you ever been a member of such a group, Sheriff Villanueva?
No,
Okay. Have you ever been invited to be a member of such a group?
nope. In fact, I had the opposite. They nicknamed me the Fletcher. I was straight arrow. So don't even bother trying.
Okay. Have you known or do you know any members of such groups?
I know plenty of members of subgroups. Yes.
Okay. And could you explain, you have up to a minute on that.
Well, when I was at East LA as a deputy, there was a group called the Cavemen. There was an older generation. They were called the Red Devils, for example. And when I left, they were the Cavemen, the tattoo. But again, subgroup, very social in nature. They socialized. They went to the river together and partied. That was the extent of it. In fact, if you look at just about every subgroup, that's pretty much what they are. They're social groups. The ones that deviate into misconduct, we're now addressing them. We're holding them accountable. To date, I've fired 131 of my personnel. I've disciplined over 800 of them. You can read it on the website, lasd.org. Go to the quarterly discipline report, and it's all laid out there in black and white. So we're holding people accountable the right way, and it's working.
Okay. Have you ever been harassed, harmed, or otherwise victimized by members of such subgroups, as you call them?
Well, if the Paul Tanaka crowd, that we could call that a subgroup, but they were definitely thirsty for power, and what they did against me in retaliating against me, I definitely was harmed by them. I was harmed personally.
Well, he was a Viking, right?
He was, but really the issue about being a Viking or not wasn't the issue. It was a group of people that got themselves into power, and they were engaged actively in misconduct throughout the department. And also, when it came to use of force in the county jails, they were concealing the fact that deputies were not being held accountable. Under my watch, 3 years in a row, we've had double-digit decreases in jail violence. However, back in the days of the 2000 boys, the 3000 boys, all of that, it was a huge problem. That's why the feds had to intervene. And that all fall on the shoulders of Paul Tanaka and his crowd.
Okay. Will you ban membership by deputies in such subgroups, as you call them? Will you fire all of them belonging to such organizations? And will you ban the display of symbols, either tattooed or affixed to sheriff stations themselves, of these organizations?
There's the policy that we have in place is now the basis of Assembly Bill 958 that I sponsored with Assemblyman Mike Gibson, and it was signed into law by Governor Newsom. That is a foundation of the state law. It is our department's policy. It's constitutionally sound. However, you cannot fire someone for possessing a tattoo or for belonging to a group. There has to be misconduct associated with it, or you are not going to write a check big enough to cover that wrongful termination. So remember, you have to be a steward of the taxpayers' resources as well. You can't frivolously throw it around.
If I can ask a follow-up regarding that, there are people, of course, who dispute that. And so my question to you would be, if one of your officers decided to become like Charlie Manson and put a swastika on his forehead, you know, or a tattoo of Hitler on his face, you couldn't take action against them?
That is entirely different, because a hateful symbol like that displayed visibly is against department policy. In fact, all tattoos have to be covered according to our policy. The question is tattoos that are not visible. Do you have, as employer, have the right? You don't. And that's where you go down the rabbit hole and you get into trouble. So we keep in a very good balance here between what's constitutionally permissible and enforcing the rule of law.
Okay. Well, yeah, I guess you've kind of already answered this, but if you want to take a minute here, what have you done in law enforcement leadership to hold officers, deputies accountable, civilian employees for misconduct? You have up to a minute.
Well, this is pretty simple. As I explained, I inherited the Kennedy Hall fiasco at East LA Station. We investigated through the pandemic. We ended up terminating 4 employees. We suspended 22 with significant suspensions of 25 days to 30 days. We also transferred out 36 employees. And Compton, we did a similar investigation there. We ended up transferring out, I believe, 18 employees. And we created a video that I authored the video, I wrote it. And we had every single member of the department watch the video and sign an attestation form. In fact, Lieutenant Strong had to watch that video and sign an attestation form and sign his personnel file. He can show it to you. And by the same token, my very first day in office, I relieved the station captain of East LA of his command. And I replaced the entire leadership team because I had no faith in their ability to lead the station. That is leadership 101. That is holding people accountable. That is taking charge. The problem is other people can't admit we did all that.
Okay. And last question in this section. Do you, oops, let me get the timer right. Do you use the term Blue Lives Matter?
Yes. Well, I don't use the term. I have the symbol Blue Lives Matter. I've seen it. Yes.
Okay. Do you understand that that term was a direct response to the Black Lives Matter movement? And
no, that is absolutely fake. The Blue Lives Matter logo and symbol has been around for over a decade and precedes the Black Lives Matter protests and the tragic murder of George Floyd. It was adopted or co-opted by a group of, I believe, the Proud Boys, if I'm not mistaken. But then again, after the law enforcement response to the civil unrest of 2020 and the January 6th fiasco at the Capitol. Now the Proud Boys are upset at law enforcement, so they were rejecting the very same symbol that they had co-opted on their own. So we kind of went back full circle now. So there's no, if you're trying to make some inference that somehow it's a symbol, you're wrong.
Well, I'm not talking about the symbol. I'm talking about the phrase.
Mhm.
Are you saying that before the Black Lives Matter movement began using that term, which began on Twitter, that you're saying that for years before that, you had heard or used the term Blue Lives Matter?
I've actually never used the term Blue Lives Matter. I've seen this symbol on flags, and it's not part of my, I've never had the need to use the term, but my point is all lives matter, including Black lives. They should matter to everyone. If they don't, well, someone's got a problem with that.
Okay, so the final question in that is, because the term Blue Lives Matter, that three-letter term, I'm not talking symbols here, the three-word term, began after the Black Lives Matter movement was launched using that term. Will you stop, if you are, then using the term Blue Lives Matter?
I don't think I've ever used the term Blue Lives Matter, because I understand there's a lot of people are letting a lot of psychological stock in the term. Is it like the cancel culture? But really, that's not part of my vocabulary. That's not how I present an argument. But I will tell you this, I will defend the right of law enforcement to exist and to do their job. And I'm referring to the flag itself. There's a blue light flag.
Into the flag.
Yeah.
And just to clarify, I think you did say that you do use the term also Black Lives Matter.
The term Black Lives Matter, yes, I've used it quite a bit.
And that's that for that set of questions. You can take a bathroom break now, Sheriff Villanueva.
I'm gonna have to after that one.
Yes, and so we will move to Chief Rodriguez, and Lieutenant Strong, you can take a bathroom break now too. As you can see, it can take maybe 15 minutes or so here, depending on the answers. Again, just to warn everybody, the following are difficult and perhaps painful questions, but they have to be asked. Are you there, Chief Rodriguez? Yes, you are. Okay. Have you ever been accused of sexual harassment or sexual assault?
No, and I said no.
Oh, okay. And have you ever committed sexual harassment or sexual assault?
No, I have not. In fact, quite the contrary. I was actually commended. I was given a department medal for training 13,000 people in sexual harassment and cultural awareness. And that was back when the subject was not very popular and it was not a household name. So quite the contrary, actually.
Have you ever committed domestic violence?
No,
Have you ever been sued in a personal or professional capacity?
no,
Have you ever been arrested? Well, I should go back on that. As Sheriff Villanueva said, when you're the head of a department, you sometimes get sued. You've been the head of departments. Were you named in any of those lawsuits?
no,
Have you ever been arrested?
no,
Have you ever been charged with a crime or convicted?
I have not.
Have you ever been formally disciplined during your career in law enforcement?
You broke up there. I'm sorry.
Have you ever been formally disciplined during your career in law enforcement?
Yes.
Okay, if you could take a minute to explain.
I was disciplined as a young deputy for a traffic collision. I received a written reprimand. In 1998, I was given 5 days off for the use of force. It was an off-duty shooting in which a suspect had stalked my wife, attempted to break into my house on the second floor with the intent of sexually assaulting her and or murdering her. And I ended up getting involved in a deputy-involved shooting. And I was disciplined 5 days for using what they called poor tactics. When I went to fight that, because the district attorney and everybody else in Orange County was in support of my shooting. When I went to fight that, the corrupt regime of Lee Baca threatened me and told me that if I was to actually exercise my administrative rights and remedies, that I would no longer be promotable. So I accepted the 5 days and moved on in my career. Later in 2008, I was disciplined 2 days for what they called failing to foster a harmonious workplace. And that was after I was holding a sergeant accountable for some what I would call performance to standard issues. She tried to spin that and file a policy of equality complaint on me. And they demanded that I participate in a conflict resolution with her. And I refused to do that because I just fundamentally do not think that you should have to resolve conflict with subordinates when they're not doing their job. And again, when I went to exercise my remedies and my, my administrative rights, I was threatened by a corrupt undersheriff that I would not be promotable, for me to keep my mouth shut, take my 2 days off, and ultimately be promoted. So that was my experience under the Lee Baca regime with discipline. I think they're, to this day, unwarranted, unfair, and but it was what it was under the Lee Baca regime. You just kept your mouth shut or your career was over. And I'm sure the sheriff would attest to that.
Okay. All right. Thank you for explaining. Have you ever defied a subpoena?
No.
Have you ever been immunized for testifying?
No.
Okay. And just to go back to the subpoena question, there's no situation like as with Sheriff Villanueva where you're contesting the legality of a subpoena?
No, I've when I get subpoenaed, I go to court.
Okay. Have you ever pleaded the Fifth Amendment?
I have not.
Okay. Have you ever been involved in any officer-involved shootings? You've already discussed
I've
that.
been involved with 2 officer-involved shootings. One was in about 1990. I was involved in a shooting with some drive-by shooting suspects. Both were, there was a non-hit shooting. Both were arrested and convicted. And then later in 1998 of the suspect who attempted to sexually assault my wife.
Okay. Have you ever engaged in any form of misconduct or crime as a member of law enforcement, even if you weren't disciplined for it?
Have I been involved in that? Was that your question?
Yeah, and this is a personal question here. Have you ever engaged in misconduct or crime as a member of law enforcement, even if you weren't disciplined for it?
No.
Have you ever personally witnessed or any form of misconduct or crime by law enforcement?
No.
Okay. Have you ever personally experienced any form of misconduct or crime against you by any other member of law enforcement?
No.
Have family, friends, or acquaintances of yours ever suffered any form of misconduct or crime against them by law enforcement?
No.
Have you ever used a racist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic, or other discriminatory slur epithet as an adult?
No.
Have you ever shared via text, email, social media, or other means racist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic, or other discriminatory content?
No.
Have you ever seen any such content shared by fellow members of law enforcement?
No.
Do you believe the law enforcement personnel record redacted to protect medical privacy, sensitive financial info, vulnerable witnesses, and the like of all current or past law enforcement officers running for sheriff should be released?
I don't believe so, because what it does is then it gives creative, artistic freedom for the other candidates to then start spinning things and putting things out, not within the proper context. So no, I don't agree with that.
Okay. Do you believe in the concept of implicit bias, and do you support implicit bias training for law enforcement?
Yes, I do believe that training is critical
Okay.
and important.
Do you believe transgender and non-binary people should be allowed to use the bathroom of their choice?
Yes.
Are you now, or have you ever been in any way affiliated with any of the following? First, the Oath Keepers.
No.
A private militia group?
No.
Any avowed white supremacist organization?
No.
A street gang or ethnic gang or biker gang or similar gang outside of law enforcement?
No.
Which term do you prefer to use and why? Clique, gang, secret society, subgroup, or something else for these sheriff department groups?
I prefer subgroup.
Okay. Have you ever been a member of such a subgroup, as you call it?
I have not.
Have you ever been a community member?
Yes.
Okay, do you care to comment up to a minute on that?
Well, I worked with a group of guys at Carson Sheriff Station that worked the graveyard shift, and they got together, very close, socially oriented group. They got very close, and they created a tattoo. It was a menacing looking tattoo that resembled, in my book, an iron cross, which was popular during the Nazi Germany swastika days. And I rejected the tattoo and rejected entrance into this group. It's well documented. I spoke to Frank Stoltz about it. KPPC wrote an article about it. So you could just Google Matt Rodriguez and deputy gangs, and you'll see that I rejected the deputy gangs and stood up. I was exercising leadership even back then.
Okay. And so obviously, have you known or do you know members of such a group? Obviously you did. Do you now?
Oh, well, not now. I've been gone from the organization for quite some time. So most of the people that I knew are, either at retirement age or retiring, but we all did. There was these subgroups at various stations, Lenox, Linwood, East LA, Compton, and they existed. But what they did between themselves and their subgroups was their business. I wasn't privy to that, and I wasn't a part of it.
Okay. And have you ever been harassed, harmed, otherwise by such members?
I have not.
Ban membership by deputies in such groups. Will you fire them, ban their symbols, tattoos, or that are affixed to sheriff stations themselves?
Well, I have a long-standing track record of holding deputies accountable who, perform misconduct and or break the law. There's zero tolerance from that. I've long gone on the record as holding them accountable. But there's a First Amendment, and if somebody has a tattoo on and it's not a menacing tattoo that represents hate, that's I believe to be free speech and protected under the First Amendment. And I cannot just fire somebody for that purpose. And any candidate who's gone on record saying they can, like one has, it's being looked at very closely by the Democratic Party. It's absolutely a false narrative. They don't have the right to fire anybody who's protected under the First Amendment. And unless there's administrative misconduct and or a violation of the law, then nobody's getting removed from the organization.
Okay. What have you done in law enforcement leadership to hold officers, deputies, or civilian employees for misconduct? 1 minute.
I worked at the Transit Services Bureau. It was an environment where we didn't really have the cream of the crop deputies. A lot of them were oftentimes dumped there as being substandard players. I held them to the same accountability I would as any deputy sheriff. I ended up separating a lot of deputy sheriffs from the organization as well as professional staff. I have disciplined deputies from everything from written reprimands to discharge, and many of them, probably more so in my tenure as a captain than any other captain in the history of the LA County Sheriff's Department. And I hold people accountable, but at the same time, I commend them when they do a great job as well. And I think I have such a high standard because I grew up in the organization. My father and brother both did over 3 decades. And I take wearing that badge seriously.
And last question in this segment, do you use the term Blue Lives Matter?
It's not a term I use, no.
All right, you can take a bathroom break now.
All right, thank you.
You're next into the interrogation room, is it, I guess. Are you there, Lieutenant Strong? Oh boy, did we lose Lieutenant Strong? I see he's still here. Is he having technical difficulties? Are you there, Lieutenant Strong? I'm asking him to.
Okay, there we go. I had to wait for the host to unmute me.
Yeah, okay, my apologies. Okay, so starting at the top again, just to warn everybody, the following are some difficult and perhaps painful questions, but they have to be asked. Have you, Lieutenant Strong, ever been accused of sexual harassment or sexual assault?
No,
Have you ever committed sexual harassment or sexual assault?
no,
Have you ever committed domestic violence?
no,
Have you ever been sued in either a personal or professional capacity?
yes.
Okay, if you could take a minute to explain.
Oh, probably in like 1993, I was taking a small claims court. A guy came by to buy a motorcycle that I had. He tried to replace some parts on it. He gave me a deposit. He actually broke something on the motorcycle and he demanded his deposit back. I did not give it to him until I was able to get the motorcycle to the shop and get it looked at. And he tried to sue me in small claims court. And that's pretty much it. And then I probably have been involved in some kind of incident within law enforcement where I was included on a lawsuit, but not personally named.
Okay. And have you ever been arrested?
No,
Okay. Ever been charged with a crime?
no,
Ever been formally disciplined during your career?
no,
Ever defied a subpoena
no,
or contested a subpoena?
no,
Have you ever been immunized before testifying?
no,
Have you ever pleaded the Fifth Amendment?
no,
Have you ever been involved in any officer-involved shootings?
yes.
Okay, if you could take a minute.
4 months into my career, I was on a big gang party at a shooting and I got into a shootout with a guy that was shooting at me with an AK-47. Fortunately, neither of us hit the other. It was just kind of a shooting back and forth in my self-defense of myself. That was one. Several years later, I was involved in a shooting where a suspect was armed and was shooting at us and we returned fire. And I've been shot at numerous other times, very close encounters where I did not return fire.
Okay, I'm glad you made it out of those encounters. You ever engaged in any form of conduct or crime as a member of law enforcement, even if you weren't disciplined?
No,
Have you ever personally witnessed any form of misconduct or crime by law enforcement?
yes.
And if you could take a minute on that one.
Oh gosh, I'm surprised that any supervisor on here can say that they've never witnessed misconduct. I worked internal affairs for many years, and so I investigated. That was part of my job duty, was to investigate police or deputy misconduct. There's been also several other situations where I've seen deputies do certain things, and I corrected it, I addressed it, I dealt with it, either recommended internal investigations or whatever the proper administrative remedy was. So I mean, throughout your career as a supervisor, I mean, you see it and you correct it. That's part of what we're there for.
Right. Okay. Have family? I'm sorry. Wait. Have you ever personally experienced any form of misconduct or crime against you by law enforcement?
Yes.
Okay, if you could take a minute on that one too.
Oh gosh, off duty. I think I stated it earlier. I have been, wrongfully detained, roughed up by police, searched. Probably some of that prior to me becoming in law enforcement, and I learned later. I've been called racial names by police officers. On duty, I have had supervisors that I reported force to that failed to do the police report or failed to file the proper force reporting documentation, even though I did it. And as a matter of fact, I've had our current sheriff lie on me a couple of times and documented memos and emails and alleged that I committed violations, which I had not, which actually backfired on him, and he ended up being the one getting moved. So I've kind of run the gamut, and I've had other supervisors as well as other deputies in off-duty incidents.
Okay. What about family, friends, acquaintances? Have they suffered misconduct, crimes by law enforcement against them too?
Yes.
If you could take a minute on that one.
Again, some of the same things. I mean, family members that have been either by law enforcement, improperly detained, improperly arrested, kind of civil rights being violated. My wife was actually placed under investigation and transferred improperly, very improperly, based on a set of lies by the current administration. So she's being retaliated against right now, as a matter of fact. So yeah, family members as well.
Okay. Have you ever used a racist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic, or other discriminatory slur or epithet as an adult?
I'm absolutely sure I have.
Okay. And if you want to explain that for a minute.
You know, as a young adult, I think that anybody that says that they've never done that in their entire life, we need to really take a look at that. As a young adult, I'm sure I've used racial terms. I'll be quite honest with you, as a Black man growing up, you know, if you want to call it a term of endearment, sometimes it's been used in my family, and I think we know which word I'm talking about. But nothing in a sense of especially sexist or homophobic, and I don't use those kind of phrases or terms at all, and definitely not in an insulting way.
Have you ever shared via text, email, social media, or other means racist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic, discriminatory?
You know, I will tell you this, what I can't sit up there and go through my entire text email history since it's been around, but it has never been my practice to do anything that is racist, sexist, or homophobic.
Okay. Have you ever seen such content shared by fellow members of law enforcement?
Yes.
Okay, if you could take a minute on that.
Again, you know, there's things that have been sent around through our department email that has been, you know, inappropriate. And as a supervisor, you know, we're obligated to report that. And again, I go back to, I've worked internal affairs, and I also worked Audit and Accountability Bureau, where I was a unit commander, and we did email audits. So I have seen some of these things that have been shared throughout the department.
Okay. Okay, do you believe the law enforcement personnel record redacted to protect medical privacy, sensitive financial info, vulnerable witnesses, and the like of all current or past law enforcement officers running for sheriff should be released?
I have no problem releasing mine. I would readily do it. I would readily make it available to anybody that asks for it.
On the condition that others do the same?
If they don't want to do it, that's up to them. I have no problem sharing mine. I mean, it would be nice if they all did it. I think it would be very eye-opening. But I can only speak for myself. Yeah. I mean, I'd love for us all to be on equal ground, but I have no problem sharing mine.
Okay. Do you believe in the concept of implicit bias, and do you support implicit bias training for law enforcement?
I do. Yes, I do believe in implicit bias. As a matter of fact, I've gone nationally and trained on implicit bias with FBI National Academy. So therefore, yeah, that training is definitely in it.
Okay, I just I gotta mute. I think it might be. I think it might have been Chief Rodriguez with the background noise there. Okay, sorry about that. Do you believe, Lieutenant Strong, transgender and non-binary people should be allowed to use the bathroom of their choice?
Absolutely.
Okay, and have you now, or have you ever been a member or any way affiliated with any of the following? The Oath Keepers?
I don't think they'd have me. No. No, I have not.
A private militia group?
No.
Any avowed white supremacist organization?
Yeah, I don't think they'd have me in there either. No.
A street gang, ethnic gang, biker gang, or other similar gang outside of law enforcement?
No.
Which term do you prefer to use and why? Clique, gang, secret society, subgroup, or something else for these sheriff department groups?
I think they all of the above apply.
Okay. Have you ever been a member of such a group?
No.
Have you ever been invited to be a member of such a group?
Nope.
have you known or do you know members of such groups?
You know, I do know people that have had the tattoos, and I think it's important to note that I did not come up through this department. Of my 29 years in law enforcement, 21 were at the sheriff's department. And so I was never kind of indoctrinated into this culture or this mindset. Do I know people who have tattoos? Yes. Do people know who I am? And with that mindset, stay very clear of me? Yes. So I don't, other than working, like I said, internal affairs and knowing people that have come across, you know, my desk. And again, I did one of the largest investigations in the department history that involved deputy gangs. So short answer long, yes, I do.
Okay. And have you been harassed, harmed, or otherwise victimized by members of these groups?
No.
Will you ban membership by deputies in these groups, firing them, banning the display of their symbols, tattoos, or those affixed to sheriff stations?
Everything I can and to the extent of the law.
Okay. What have you done in law enforcement leadership to hold officers or deputies or civilian employees accountable for misconduct?
I have taken action when absolutely needed. If I have seen minor offensive, I pull them aside, I counsel them. Any major offenses, I take the appropriate action based on department policy or administrative investigation guidelines. Again, I've worked internal affairs, so I've done numerous investigations on both professional staff as well as sworn in terms of misconduct. I've recommended administrative investigations for numerous policy violations from, you know, very minor all the way up to, you know, fireable offenses.
Right. Okay. Do you use the term Blue Lives Matter?
No.
Okay. All right. So that concludes that set of questions there. Moving along now, it's approaching 10 o'clock, and I do want to get to some of your questions from the floor, but I also want to get to some of your questions that you sent. So yes or no, we'll start with Lieutenant Strong here. Do you use or have you ever used a tobacco product? Oops, are you there, Lieutenant Strong? Oh yeah, I'm sorry, did I mute you? Or I gotta unmute you, sorry. Are you unmuted? Ask to unmute.
How about now?
Okay, there we go.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yes.
You have, okay, and just to, I still have, I think Melissa had to step away. Cynthia Patino Talmich, if you could unmute the candidates, are you still there, Cynthia? I think, did Cynthia?
No, I'm still here. I'm on my phone and I don't know if I have limited functions on
Yeah.
here.
Let me find someone else to help with that. Tina Berg, are you there with the capacity to unmute candidates when we get to them? She fall asleep. It's a little awkward for me. Kaveh, are you there, Kaveh?
You know what, Paul? I got it.
You got it? Okay. So the tobacco products, you have used tobacco. Okay. And what about alcohol? Lieutenant Strong, do you consume alcohol?
Yes.
Okay. What about illegal drugs? Have you ever consumed an illegal drug?
No.
Okay. Have you ever become addicted to any substance?
No.
Okay. Do you believe that the so-called war on drugs has been a massive, miserable failure that has wreaked tremendous amounts of human pain and suffering, corruption, personal and organized crime, and personal, political, and state-sponsored violence, both here and around the world?
Yes.
Do you believe in legalizing, taxing, and regulating all recreational drugs, not just marijuana?
I'd have to kind of look at a policy on that. I would say no, inherently no in terms of all illegal drugs.
Currently illegal.
Currently in legal drugs. Yes, that's the term I'm looking for.
And do you believe in the reinstatement of the Prohibition era banning alcohol?
No,
Do you believe that people who have abused or become addicted to drugs should be treated by medical professionals and never criminalized for their addiction or substance abuse, absent the commission of other crimes?
yes,
Do you believe that freely consenting adults have a fundamental human right to do as they wish with their sex lives?
yes,
Do you believe that adult prostitution should be legalized and regulated so that all strictly adult forms of sex work, not just exotic dancing or pornography or the like, fall under state labor law so that law enforcement can concentrate efforts and resources on combating sexual slavery, sexual abuse, sex trafficking, and sexual exploitation of minors?
and having not given it much thought, I would be open to entertaining that.
Okay. The United States has the highest incarceration rate in the world. What, if anything, have you done and will you do to end mass incarceration?
Educate. I would be using whatever resources I have to apply the not the resources, but to apply fixes to our problem. Mass incarceration is occurred because of homelessness, because of drugs, because of mental health issues. And I think that's what we're really looking at right here is finding help. So I would be an advocate for that. I would be an advocate for diversion programs. I would be an advocate for mental health resources as opposed to incarceration. I don't think we're going to find our solutions to the unhoused, to the addicted, and to the mentally ill in our jail cells.
Okay.
So I would absolutely work with the stakeholders and the people that can bring those solutions to the table.
Okay, that concludes that section. Let's go to Sheriff Villanueva. Are you there, Sheriff? Let's unmute Sheriff. Okay, there we go. So do you use or have you ever used tobacco, Mr. Sheriff?
Never. And I also led the charge to ban smoking in the county jails back in the late 80s.
Okay. What about alcohol? Do you consume it? Have you?
Occasionally on social events.
Okay. What about illegal drugs, past or present? Have you ever used them?
Never.
Have you ever become addicted to any substance?
Nope.
Do you believe that the so-called war on drugs has been a massive, miserable failure that has wreaked tremendous amounts of human pain and suffering, corruption, personal and organized crime, and personal, political, and state-sponsored violence, both here and around the world?
For most of that, yes, I believe that.
Do you believe in legalizing, taxing, and regulating all recreational drugs, not just marijuana?
No, for a very simple reason. Over the last, since Prop 47, we've decriminalized the hard drugs. And right now we're sitting on a 1,000% increase in drug overdose deaths because of fentanyl. And so the argument to legalize hard drugs is flies in the face of the facts that people are dying left and right on the streets.
Do you believe in reinstatement of the Prohibition era banning alcohol?
No.
Do you believe that people who have abused or become addicted to drugs should be treated by medical professionals and never criminalized for their addiction or substance abuse, absent other crimes?
I believe drug addiction should be treated as a medical problem, not a criminal one.
Okay. Do you believe that freely consenting adults have a fundamental human right to do as they wish with their sex lives?
As long as it's in between adults, legal adults?
Freely
Yes.
consenting adults, yes.
Yes.
Okay. Do you believe that adult prostitution should be legalized and regulated so that all strictly adult forms of sex work, not just exotic dancing, pornography, and the like, fall under state labor law so that law enforcement can concentrate efforts and resources on combating sexual slavery, abuse, trafficking, and exploitation of minors?
I think the human trafficking problem that would be generated because of that, your problem is actually bigger than the solution you're offering. So I don't agree with that.
The US has the highest incarceration rate in the world. What, if anything, have you done and will do to end mass incarceration? Up to 1 minute.
Well, this is real simple. I can tell you first thing I did is with the COVID, the pandemic, when it first set upon us, in February of 2020, I initiated the largest depopulation of a nation jail in history. We went from a 17,000 plus capacity to under 12,000. We did it in the span of about 3.5 months. That became a national model for successfully depopulating to combat the COVID-19 and have enough space to quarantine, isolate, and treat in place. And that model worked throughout the nation. The people that followed, they saved lives. The scofflaws out there said, we're not going to let anybody go. They had their inmates, prisoners die by the dozens, including staff members. So what we did worked. However, now we have to make sure that the people are incarcerated or only there because they pose a physical threat to the community. And that should be the standard why people are in jail. If they're not a physical threat to the community, we need to find ways to divert them. Alternatives to incarceration, Office of Diversion and Reentry are things that we're doing right now, trying to increase the capacity to have those alternatives outside of the jails.
Okay. All right. That concludes that section for you. Chief Rodriguez, are you there? Okay, asked to unmute. Okay. Yes. Okay, great. Do you use or have you used a tobacco product?
Yes, not cigarettes, but occasionally I enjoy a hookah with my Middle Eastern and Armenian friends.
What about alcohol?
Socially, yes.
Okay. An illegal drug, past to present?
Never.
Ever become addicted to any substance?
No.
Believe that the so-called war on drugs has been a massive, miserable policy failure that has tremendous amounts of suffering, corruption, personal and organized crime, personal, political, state-sponsored violence, both here and around the world.
I agree with that. Complete government boondoggle.
Do you believe in legalizing, taxing, and regulating recreational drugs, not just marijuana?
No, I don't. I do not agree with that. No.
Do you believe in the Prohibition era of banning alcohol?
No.
Do you believe that people who have abused and become addicted to drugs should be treated by medical professionals and never criminalized for their addiction or substance abuse absent of the crime?
I do agree with that.
Do you believe that consenting adults have the right to do as they wish with their sex lives?
Yes.
Do you believe that adult prostitution should be legalized and regulated so that all strictly adult forms of sex work, not just exotic dancing and pornography and the like, fall under state labor law so that law enforcement can concentrate efforts, resources in combating sexual slavery, abuse, trafficking, and exploitation of minors?
I think there's a conversation to be had there, sort of like a government-sponsored program like you see in Las Vegas or something like that. But I think I'd have to do more research before I signed off on that.
And this is the highest incarceration rate in the world. What, if anything, have you done or will do to end mass incarceration?
Well, I think we've already learned through the three strikes era and, you know, the war on drugs and what have you, that we're not going to arrest our way out of societal problems. I think that programming is essential. Programs need to be that take place in the county jail. Opening up the back door and letting all the inmates out into the streets is not the answer, COVID or not. But I do believe that programming is the answer. If you have programs related to domestic violence where you can try to break the cycle through programming of the offenders and get together with the victims, get together with the children, that ultimately we're trying to do. And this goes with any crime or any family. Try to break the cycle of recidivism, break the cycle of role modeling. You know, your parents who perhaps are in and out of jail, and all that's done. It starts at a very young age through programming and education.
Okay, Cynthia Sanders feedback. I think it's on yours, Chief Rodriguez. That I could hear you. Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
No, it's fine. Yeah, no, that concludes that section. Okay, let's go to let's see here. This would be you, Chief Rodriguez. Do you support no cash bail?
I do not. I think that it has to be risk-based. We cannot just have everyone commit a crime and then be released back into society. Everything has to be, really evaluated based on a risk-based model.
Okay, but should money factor?
Should what?
Money, cash bail. I mean, so you believe?
I do believe that we should have a bail system, a cash bail system. I don't believe in zero bail.
Okay. And what about you, Lieutenant Strong? Oops, I gotta unmute him. Lieutenant Strong, where are you?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I definitely believe that we need a new system. We cannot have cash bill alone. However, there may be times when cash, and I don't like the word bail, but a cash system may be appropriate.
Okay. Sheriff Villanueva?
There we go. I believe we should end the cash bail system. We need to replace it with a risk assessment algorithm that measures or quantifies what is the risk this person is out pretrial detention in the community. What is the risk to the community? What are the odds the person is going to reappear in court later on? It shouldn't be based on the ability to pay or not.
Okay. And let's go with you at the start here. 1 minute. Do you believe, if you want a minute, the broken windows theory of policing?
There's aspects of the broken windows theory that actually do work. And the data is out there and it shows that it does work. However, it is a slippery slope when we go from a broken windows theory to, for example, NYPD's, they had their stop and frisk program, which was wildly unconstitutional and not permissible. But if you're ignoring the small things, odds are you're permitting the small things to become bigger things down the road. So there has to be a balance between what you're doing, and it has to survive constitutional muster and preserving the rights of the people involved. Look at Venice, no further than Venice. LAPD was told hands off on Venice, that the city is going to take care of it, and it was an absolute disaster until we stepped in and started addressing the homeless crisis in Venice. Prime example.
Okay. And what about you, Chief Rodriguez, broken windows theory?
Well, you know, the whole broken windows theory is built on the premise that you take care of the small things before they turn into big things. So quality of life, small things are important. We're seeing when those are ignored, what happens. You know, you just go take a look at downtown Los Angeles, take a look at the homeless populations, take a look at what's happening with just drug usage. And again, no programming, no consequences to the crime, no accountability. So there is a balance. Yet I do believe in that taking care of the small things and, you know, cleaning up your front yard prevents it from being overrun with, you know, a disaster.
Okay. And Lieutenant Strong.
Yeah, I have to agree with Chief Rodriguez. It speaks to taking care of the little things. However, I do believe that it needs to be not a law enforcement alone function. It needs to be a community function with other resources, other entities that can help to prevent some of those small things from happening. Much of it doesn't get handled by law enforcement.
Okay. Right. Let's go to you again here, Lieutenant Strong. Stop and frisk.
Yeah, so stop and frisk, absolutely not. We have legal standing on when we can search somebody and pat them down, but the general just stop and frisk policies, no.
Okay. And Chief Rodriguez?
No, not without probable cause.
Okay. And Sheriff Villanueva?
Yeah, no, Terry versus Ohio definitely defined what the legal standards are and constitutionality on that. And NYPD took that a step too far.
Okay. And next question, we will go with, I'm out of order here. I guess Chief Rodriguez, though, what about predictive policing?
I'm completely in line with predictive policing. I believe in intelligence-led policing based on crime trends, based upon data. I do subscribe to that theory, and I think flexible deployments based upon those crime trends and what the data is telling you that is absolutely appropriate in law enforcement.
Okay. And Lieutenant Strong?
Yeah, predictive policing, there is data. We have goo gobs of data that we can pull from right now out there. I think it is a beneficial tool to use that data. However, I don't believe that it is a beneficial way to use that as an excuse to over police under marginalized communities.
Okay, and Mr. Sheriff?
Well, predictive policing or intelligence-led policing is a crutch. And those are people that are walking away from the tenets of community policing, and they're not focusing on building relationships. They're doing everything is driven by data and not by building those relationships with the community. It's a tool, it's out there, and it kind of tells you where to focus, but it can't come at the expense of building relationships with the community, which is the foundation of community policing.
Okay.
Paul, I'm just gonna have to interrupt you for a second. So we have several questions in the chat box about when this forum will end. It's already 10 o'clock and there are attendees who would like to ask questions.
Right. Okay. So, yeah, why don't we go to some questions from the floor as we're approaching the 10 o'clock hour. If you would raise your hand. I see Chris Duvali is the first hand raised. Are you there, Chris? We need to unmute Chris.
Yes, you got to unmute me,
Yeah.
Chair. Okay, this is to all the candidates. Hello, Sheriff, Chief, and Lieutenant. Evidently, currently, we have a discrepancy relative to the scope of work of deputies and the educational requirements to perform that scope of work. Would you be open to elevating that bar of becoming a deputy by requiring having bachelors of, say, criminal justice and dual degree with LCSW, social work, or be it psychology? Because the scope of work of our deputies involves both of those at an extensive level above, say most civilians or those not in the department. And if you are open to that, and be it outside of criminal justice, psychology, and social work, what degrees would you require? And of course, I do understand that that means that we need to raise the compensation of our deputies by requiring that requirement of having, say, dual bachelor degrees. So, let's start at the hierarchy here. Sheriff, would you start there, and we'll go to Chief and then Lieutenant?
Well, I can proudly say that we're already there. I wasn't the first, I'm the second sheriff with a doctorate degree, but I earned mine the hard way, an earned doctorate from the University of Laverne. And as of this January, this year, we've now raised the standard to become a deputy sheriff trainee to a minimum of an associate's degree or 60 units from a four-year institution. So I firmly believe education is one of the foundations of the department, and it offers a whole new perspective outside of the box, the organizational reality the deputies are in and they work in. So that perspective is a breath of fresh air. We need it. And we're demanding it up through the ranks. For example, to get to the rank of lieutenant or captain, those without education are not going to fare well. It's the people with education, they're consistently advancing. So I hold education to be extremely important. I agree entirely with your train of thought.
Okay, thank you, Sheriff. Chief Rodriguez? Are you there, Chief? Oh, unmute. There we go.
Okay. No, I was saying I appreciate the question, and it's a little bit about preaching to the choir. I've spent most of my adult life in formalized education. I have 2 master's degrees, one from USC, one from Cal State Long Beach, bachelor's degree from UCLA, and an associate of arts degree. So I do value education, but I also recognize that not everybody has the opportunity to go to school. There's a lot of people go to the military. There's a lot of people that can't afford to go to college or perhaps have to go to work and support their family. So I do, in theory, believe in what you're saying, but I think in real practice, it may be a high bar to achieve. But one thing I will do as the sheriff, until that happens and we raise the the requirement. And as the sheriff's saying, it's now an associate's degree, but if you raise it to a bachelor's degree or more, until that time though, I'm willing to partner with you to create training that we could bring to the deputies, current deputies and future deputies on all those issues that you're concerned about. I'm talking about state-of-the-art training, best practices in terms of mental health, mental illness, homeless, or any other, topic you think is appropriate.
Okay, and Lieutenant Strong?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with higher education. And I think the more education that you can have towards any one thing makes you more valuable. However, I have to agree with the chief where he says that, some people don't get these opportunities. Some people are not allotted these opportunities, either for family obligations or for financial reasons. And I think we need to evaluate the person. There are a lot of highly educated people out there that are not very intelligent or not very good people just on the inside. And I think that's what we need to focus on is the compassion, empathy, the fact of giving respect to people. So partnering with organizations that can bring in relevant training, not just a checkbox that the state says, hey, you need this training, and we go into a classroom or watch it on a video and people are doing 5 other things multitasking while the video is playing. We need relevant education that's going to be beneficial for the community.
Okay, great. Thank you, Lieutenant Strong. And next question, just take maybe this one last one, unless someone has, then we can go to closing statements since it is 10 o'clock. It's Sylvester, or Chris, did you still have your hand up? Something, or you're good? Okay, and Sylvester Jr.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Okay, so this is for all of the candidates. You all spoke about what you would do to combat mass incarceration. Recently introduced, there is legislation. As we know that the prison industrial complex is a billion-dollar industry, and you all are committing to do things to battle mass incarceration. Currently, on the state level, our Constitution reads that neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as punishment for a crime whereof the party shall have duly convicted, shall exist, within the state. And there has been a legislation, ACA 3, to remove the exception from our state constitution. So I'm wondering from the candidates if they are in support of removing the exception clause to slavery within the state of California under ACA 3, which was introduced by State Senator Sidney Conley.
And let's go with Lieutenant Strong first on that one.
Yes, absolutely. I would support that. The 13th Amendment has been used for over a century to continue with slave practices. It has been used to continue to incarcerate people of color, people of lower socioeconomic status. And I absolutely agree with removing any reference to slavery or involuntary servitude completely.
Okay, and Sheriff Villanueva?
Well, I need to take a look at what that actually says. And I appreciate your bringing this to my attention. I'm going to have to take a hard look at that. But I do know one thing. There's a lot of offender-centric policies are emanating out of Sacramento where victims are in the backseat. And the plight of victims of crime hits hardest in the African-American and Latino community. And they don't seem to get the top billing when it comes to legislation out of Sacramento. And so I definitely want to make sure that anything we do that's going to change our system puts victims first and foremost to be taken care of and provided for. So there's harm reduction on their front. And then we'll talk about obviously making sure that those who are incarcerated pose a threat. Restorative justice is a great path moving forward in terms of making people whole again and accountable for their misdeeds. So there's a lot of work to be done, but it's going to require everybody having a seat at that table, not only one ideological driver.
So Sylvester has, I guess, a quick follow-up. He said, is that a no then?
No, it's a qualified. We need to study that a little bit more.
Okay, okay. Thank you, Mr. Sheriff. And where was I? Who was next? Chief Rodriguez, you haven't spoken yet. Yeah, please.
Yes,
go.
sir. Yeah, I would say at face value, I would support that legislation. And I want to make it clear that my campaign started literally 1 or 2 blocks south of the Coliseum in South Los Angeles. And the vast majority of my supporters are African American. They've understood my platform. They understand that I'm the only candidate that will go on record that says that I participated in a generation of law enforcement that furthered policies and practices that were abusive to people of color. And I've committed to making that change. Again, changing law enforcement from a gladiator mentality to a guardian mentality, one in which we are no longer just ramming laws down people who are less fortunate and more marginalized communities, and where we're becoming peacekeepers in our community. That's been well accepted in the African American and Latino communities, and they know I support that, and I support this legislation as well.
Okay. And so we have, I think, one last hand in the room. If the candidates would be willing to go one more round and then to closing statements. Kaveh?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for giving me this time. Good to see you, Sheriff. There's a question for Sheriff. I guess Sebastian Gorka didn't have time for Sheriff, so he's here. My question is in regards to the, Sheriff is right. When it comes to the gangs in his department, we can't point on them because he doesn't public their identities. I want to ask, we know that there's a reason that Democratic Party took their endorsement off. I want to ask about Andres Guardado. Are you willing to put the publicized identity of the officers who killed Andres Guardado so we can actually look into it to see which kind of gangs are in it, or you're going to continue protecting these gang members?
Well, Keva, I can tell you this. If we think we have a gang member on the department, please identify them personally.
You need to. You have been refusing to publicize the identity. You have done everything in your power to not to publicize their identity, Sheriff. Can we ask Sheriff, is that true?
Am I gonna answer the question?
Yeah. Let him answer.
All right. First and foremost, the entire case has been turned over to the Justice System Integrity Division. All of the individual deputies have been identified. And as Deputies Vega and Deputy Hernandez, you should know this already. This is already public record. In fact, we've released the names of every single deputy and deputy involved shootings during my tenure. You can go to LASD.org on the website and you can read for it yourself. Go to the transparency tab, go down to deputy involved shootings. You can see every single incident. You can see the names of the deputies, the names of the individual involved, the location. You can get the coroner's report link. You can get the district attorney's opinion. You can get video surveillance, body worn camera footage. All of that is available. You cannot get more transparent than that. All right.
Sheriff is playing games. Sheriff is playing games. Sheriff, those 2 officers that he's naming have been disciplined for a traffic stop. Sheriff is playing games.
Been disciplined.
I'm talking about Andres Guardado. Sheriff, the two deputies that you named have been disciplined for the traffic collusion, and you know that. You know that.
I don't think you understand how our system works very well, which is fine.
That's the way the system works is the problem, Sheriff. Is the problem.
They're relieved of duty.
John Kizzy, Fred Williams. We had more than 300 people being killed under your leadership, Sheriff. We're asking for accountability. And it's not about the woke culture. It's about the nation is waking up to you.
Well, sir, the facts don't support your position. All right. If we had 300, give me the 300 names, the 300 incidents. Do you have them? I have every single incident that happened under my watch is public record.
We have the name of the victims. We do have the name of the victims.
Well, I don't think, sir, you really understand what you're talking about, which is fine. That shows that it's a challenge for law enforcement always that misinformation out there in the public is an obstacle we have to overcome. That is why our website, I encourage you, go to lasd.org, spend some time on the website. It's going to take you a long time because there's a lot of information there. All right. You can do a Public Records Act request as well. And we even put those requests on the website. 1421, Senate Bill 1421. There's a lot of information available that was never available prior to me taking office. That is why you know everything you know about the case of Andres Guardado. And the fact you also are not aware of that went to the district attorney. We also invited the attorney general to monitor that case as soon as it happened. And the FBI also is monitoring that case. So we obviously include all the parties involved in these cases to make sure we have an outcome that's sustainable by evidence, by the facts, and by the law. And we hold people accountable once we conclude an investigation. We have not finished any of those investigations, so how could you say discipline was imposed? That makes no sense. You have to do the evidence, the investigation first, and then we make a determination as an employer. But we're not going to convict anybody until we're done with our job. And the DA has to give us a return on the result of that shooting in particular. Same thing with Dejan Kizzy, same thing with Fred Williams. And it takes on average, this is the hard part, it takes us about 6 to 8 months to put a case together to present it. It takes the DA about 2 to 3 years to give us an answer. So in the meantime, it doesn't help us. I want to see these cases back to us within 90 days. Then justice delayed is justice denied, as you said. 90 days is something we need. So I need you to call on the DA, say, hey, release these cases, give us a decision one way or another. Don't leave everybody hanging. You're leaving the families of victims hanging. You leave the deputies hanging. Everyone is in limbo for years. Why? That falls on the DA. And that is one thing that is missing that we need to fix.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Sheriff. Thank you, Kaveh. Because that took some time, I'd like to give at least a minute to Chief Rodriguez and Lieutenant Strong, if you wanted to comment on that, and then we'll move to closing statements. Yikes. There we go. Chief Rodriguez.
That was a question directed strictly for the sheriff at the time. I don't have a comment on that.
And do you have any comment, Chief Rodriguez?
I don't have any comment on that.
All right, then let's move to closing statements. We began in alphabetical order, so let's go in reverse alphabetical order. Sheriff Villanueva, why don't you go first?
I want to thank everyone who's been following this all the way through the end. This has been a kind of a marathon, Paul. So,
well, thank you for sticking around.
This has been an oddball, but if people were educated by all the information that was presented, that's good. Everyone needs to make their own opinion. But I'll tell you this: with the smash and grab robberies, the rise of homelessness, violent crime is up, not the 5 or whatever % someone is claiming, but violent crime is up about 1.5%. Overall, Part 1 crimes are up 5%, and that includes property crimes. And homicide is the biggest concern. It's up 94% in the last 2 years. A lot of it obviously driven by the whole pandemic and the rearrangement. And the defunding does not work. That has been proven throughout the entire nation. The question is, what is the position of the LACDP? Are you going to embrace the defunding movement as the only entity in the entire country? Or are you going to pay attention to the experiment of New York City, Minneapolis, Seattle, Portland, Rochester, Minnesota, Rochester, New York, Austin, Texas, San Francisco, Oakland? Every single one has said no to the defunding, and they're trying to reverse course because they met with huge upswings in violent crime. So cops have a role. Some people do not like law enforcement, but the fact is they have a role in a civil and just society. And the Sheriff's Department has suffered consecutive years of defunding. The Board of Supervisors has doubled down on the defunding, and it is not working. The policies I put into place regarding homelessness, we cleaned up Venice Boardwalk. We cleaned up San Vicente Boulevard in front of the VA Center. We've cleaned up Vera Street, Topanga Canyon, East LA, all the places throughout the county that our homeless outreach service team has been. We've succeeded in getting the people that are homeless the housing that they need and restored the community back to its original place. No arrests, no use of force, and that is a fact. That is progress. Body-worn cameras, progress. Accountability across the board, that is progress. And we're lowering the liability of the county now. Jail force is down. Jail violence is down. Traffic collisions, serious ones with huge price tags, those are down. We're opening the Emergency Vehicle Operations Center up in Castaic to increase training. But you know, it costs us $7 million to train deputies for one day. $7 million, that's the price tag. So when you're defunding law enforcement, you're defunding our ability to be able to train and do all the wonderful things we've been talking about this evening. So what I'm doing, the reform efforts that I've embarked in are working. And they're the greatest set of reforms in the history of the department. And we've advanced so far in 3 years in comparison to the previous 30 years. And anyone who is working on the department right now will tell you that the pace of reform is great. It's sustainable because we have a plan of action and we're executing it. Every single thing I campaigned on, I followed through and I've accomplished. Everything that you think you know about me came from indicted Mark Riley Thomas and a board of supervisors that are bent on acquiring power and defunding law enforcement. They're out of tune with the community, and they're going to be relegated to the dustbin of history because their policies are not sustainable. The public is figuring this out. They want to continue to see the homeless taken care of. They want to reclaim their streets, and the sheriff's department is leading the way in that regard. So my position, I believe in John F. Kennedy's version of the Democratic Party, FDR, and the tent of the Democratic Party should be big enough to embrace everybody. If you want to construct the tent to be so narrow that only the progressive wing exists and nobody else, well, it's not going to bode well for the future. So the question is, when you make your decision on who to vote for, how big is that tent going to be? And that's the whole role that the Democratic Party is supposed to represent all people, not just one very narrow ideological band of the party. So remember that what you think you know about me, you learned it from the indicted MRT. And I stand by my record, and I'm going to work hard to continue leading the Sheriff's Department into the future. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Sheriff. And I did give you more than 2 minutes there, as I will give to your colleagues. That was a little over 4.5 minutes. Who was next? Lieutenant Strong, if you could give us your closing statement.
Yes, again, thank you everybody who stuck around to listen to what's going on. Listen, Alex just mentioned, ask anybody in the department, and I am somebody that's in the department. Things are not good. We need to fix what's on the inside before we can begin to really impact what's on the outside. Over 15 years ago, Alex walked into a unit and he immediately came after myself and another deputy without ever taking the time to get to know us, learn our work product. And he did that as retribution to one of the former sergeants that was there because it was his friend. Alex has promoted a vengeful, vindictive policy and leadership process within this department. He talks about setting standards for supervision and executives. He has not. He's created these standards, but he does not hold everybody accountable to them. He only holds the people that he does not want in position accountable to it. As one of the most senior tenured lieutenants with one of the most amount of experience on this department, I can't get promoted. Why? Because I have a history with him. My wife is in the same position as well as so many other people. I spoke to a lieutenant not too long ago that mentioned having 5 captains in a year and a half. That's not consistency. Alex has shown that if you don't do what he says, how he says it, when he says it, off with your head. And so now what we have is an entire executive staff that stays silent. They won't speak to him. They won't do what's right because he has already demonstrated Off with your head if you do not follow my principles. This is what's broken on the inside. We have a sheriff that uses every legal roadblock that he can to refuse to acknowledge that we have a problem with deputy gangs within our department. He says gangs need a criminal component. Assaulting other deputies, criminal. Lying on reports, criminal. Violating civil rights, criminal. I've investigated. I know it's there. I don't need another report or another panel to come and tell me what I know exists. We need to take steps and take actions. If we cannot treat each other on the inside with common dignity and respect, if we have deputies assaulting deputies, why wouldn't it be okay for them to assault the citizens? Homelessness, we need to address it. We're not going to find the solutions to homelessness and addiction and mental health in a jail cell. We've tried that for the last 30 years. It has not worked. All right. We need to establish a protocol and a policy on our use of force in shootings. As the chairperson of the Shooting Analysis Committee, I sat there and watched about 8 or 9 lieutenants from various units go across a shooting that was clearly out of policy. And they found ways to justify it. Why? Because of the message that was coming from Alex Villanueva. He set the tone right when he came in. He tried to bring back deputies that were clearly in misconduct. They were clearly in misconduct, and they had clearly on video violated the law. And he spent a lot of time trying to bring in a lot of money, trying to bring that deputy back. That sends a message. That sends a message to the leadership. So, what we need to do is we need to establish true policies, true protocols. Something I want to change is the promotional process, because again, right now, it's all just a tap on the shoulder. The people that he's talking about, that he's promoted, are by far not the most qualified. And I'm not saying that I am. What I'm saying is I know the people, I know their resumes, I know where they've worked. These are the people that he can control, and we need to change the process. That's something I intend to do so that the community truly has input. We need to bring our community, our board of supervisors, our elected officials to the table. Slinging insults and speaking ill of them is not going to benefit us in any way, shape, or form. We need to create space where we can have collaborative efforts, collaborative communication in order to build relationships, in order to build solutions. That's what I'm about. I'm about compassion, I'm about caring, and I'm about making dramatic change on the inside that is going to have an organic effect on the outside. And I am looking for anybody that wants to come to the table and be a stakeholder in that. I invite you, come to the table. Bring solutions, bring ideas. Let's all work together on that. That's what we're looking for. I guess that's pretty much about it. I think that the reality of it is that
we're at right around 5 minutes. So yeah, if you could.
Okay, I'll wrap it up. Again, ask for those personnel records. Ask for those disciplinary histories. I'll open mine up. Everybody can tell you their own resume, and it's always going to sound good. Do your homework.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Lieutenant Strong, and especially if you're sticking around. Chief Rodriguez, final closing statement from you. You have up to 5 minutes or so if you want.
Unmute there. Thank you to you and your friends for putting this together. And also thank you to my 2 colleagues that, endured this questioning this evening. I learned a lot from them as well. But a couple things. First of all, the sheriff talks about a 1.5% increase in violent crime. I would suggest he takes a look at his own website. That's where I get my statistics from. It says violent crime has increased by 75%, homicide 75%. We know that morale and arrests are down. So there's a lot going on in the sheriff's department that's unprecedented. We have a defunding operation going on by the board of supervisors. The sheriff's department is literally falling apart. There's the internal mechanisms that are falling apart. We have divisions that have no chiefs, no commanders, no captains, because they're all walking off the job. I was told 6 months ago that there was going to be a mass exodus in November and December of disability cases of people exercising their 1 year tax-free disability pay, because they didn't want to be around the sheriff's office during the campaign. Why? Because they get a free year off and they want to find out who the next sheriff is going to be. Okay, and this started even before the man took office. He fired 20 tenured executives in a very undignified, unprofessional, and disrespectful manner. Now, why do you do that? You do that because, just like Lieutenant Strong said, you want to exercise control and power. And then he boasts about these promotions that look like the community. What they are window dressing at best. You could promote people of color and females, but if they're not qualified, then what's the point? And there's no process. It's not based upon bona fide occupational qualifications, merit-based or deserved. Yeah, you can come on, go onto a campaign and come on a forum or stand at the podium and brag how you have, demographics across the board. But that's not leadership. Leadership is people who are leading, not an undersheriff that's asleep at his desk, or people that have never earned the rank or have had super promotions, 2 or 3 ranks, just because they're yes men. So I don't know whether the sheriff is actually, and I don't want to label him, but I don't know if he's delusional or whether it's just the emperor has no clothes because he surrounded himself with yes men who tell him how great he is. But I'm all over this county, from Glendale to Burbank to Orange County to Beverly Hills out to Vegas and back. And, people are not telling me how great he is. They're telling us that he needs to change. The entire Democratic Party has turned on him and asked for his resignation. He's got the entire political establishment turned against him. Why? Because he governs from a place of ego, a place of arrogance, a place of retribution and anger. And the difference between he and I, very clearly, the difference between he and I, again, I govern from a place of love. The common sense candidate who's very moderate, who's not beholden to any special interests, who didn't take money from, reserve deputies and civilian advisors and, shake down the Sheriff's Youth Foundation or pay to play, trade, concealed weapons permits for campaign donations. All of this stuff is really borderline gray. And I hope he takes a close look at what he's doing, because some of us will be, doing that comparative analysis to see exactly who is, donating the $1.2 million and what are they getting in return. So here's the point. Again, my campaign started in South LA. It went into the Latino community, the Middle Eastern community, the Armenian community, and most recently the Asian community, and now the Jewish community on the West Side. And people are embracing my concepts of respect-based leadership, one where we treat everybody, regardless of what your race, color, religion, creed, regardless of your socioeconomic standing, regardless of your immigration status. Everybody gets treated respectfully and with dignity. And, a lot of the programs the sheriff has put in place is smoke and mirrors. Kicked ICE out of the jail, but he walked them across the courtyard and handed them to a contractor. Come on, that's not right. Or what happened to those ICE officials? Now they're out in the field, and now they just go pay the immigrants a visit at their house, and they deport the entire family, not just the inmate that was being released. So let's stop with the smoke and mirrors. Let's be real. Let's look at the common sense candidates. There's a lot of good choices. There's some bad choices that are being looked at by the Democratic Party. And I'm gonna give you a little tip. I won't tell you what it is, but I got a gift for that steering commission and for that entire steering committee tomorrow that's gonna be voting on Tuesday night. They'll be hearing from Matt Rodriguez, because I do speak truth to power. They're gonna know who I am, and they're gonna know what I'm saying about their chosen candidate, Cecil Rhambo. So I'll just say this. Thank you for the opportunity. We will, Lieutenant, we will take the Sheriff's Department and we will move it forward with great people like you, okay? We will treat people respectfully, ethically, sensibly, professionally, empathetically, civilly, and transparently, with the respect and dignity that the people in this community deserve. Thank you very much. Everybody have a great night.
All right. Thank you, Chief Rodriguez. Again, to you for sticking around. I was right. It took 3 hours. We started late, around 7:30, a little after actually. And so thanks to the candidates for staying and answering so many questions. There were a lot of questions that wanted to be asked, and so thank you for doing so. I do want to say before we wrap up, though, that of course only 3 candidates were here tonight. 4 candidates of the 7 total that are seeking the Tuesday night endorsement were not here. Once again, Britta Steinbrenner, her campaign manager on Wednesday, I believe, said that Captain Steinbrenner had come down with COVID. And I said, you know, I was sorry to hear that, but I hope that, you know, I said, are you sure she'll still be sick on Sunday? And I never heard back. As I said at the start, former now retired Chief Robert Luna from Long Beach had scheduled an 8 p.m. interview with me for airing tonight. I had promised the candidates at least 20 to 30 minutes of speaking time on their own tonight. And so I wanted to give him a half hour on his own. And about a half an hour before, his campaign manager called and texted me that a family emergency had come up. So unfortunately, he's not here tonight. Who am I forgetting? Well, I know the big kahuna, but Steinbrenner, Luna, and who am I forgetting? Oh, Mr. What is he now? You demoted him, right, Mr. Sheriff? I don't know his exact rank now. Eli Vera, I believe he's a commander. Pardon me, I do know that. He was an assistant sheriff. Commander Vera, I started contacting candidates this previous Monday. I didn't hear back from him or his campaign for 2 days until Wednesday, when I had been giving candidates really the choice of whatever they want to do, whatever night this weekend, and interview possibilities if they couldn't make whatever night was chosen. I never heard back from him until Wednesday. The campaign said he would not be available for any forum for at least a few weeks. No explanation given other than it's just too close, too soon to schedule. So that's Commander Vera's absence or explanation thereof. And of course, as I said a moment ago, the big kahuna, it's probably not accurate. LAX Airport Chief Cecil Rhambo, who obtained the, or earned, I should say, recommendation of a seldom used LACDP, LA County Democratic Party endorsement committee called the SEER Committee, which is designed for races often where Democrats haven't won, aren't currently holding. And they, of course, we have a Democrat, Sheriff Villanueva, in office now. They decided to enact this committee, gather the committee, and do a super early endorsement. Here it is January, the June 7th election is 5 months away, and they want us to endorse now on Tuesday night, instead of using the regular process, which would have it in a couple months, and let the candidates keep campaigning and keep, you know, sitting for forums like this with Democratic clubs, answer more questions from journalists. So we're being tasked with deciding on Tuesday night. Now, it doesn't have to happen on Tuesday night. It may be polled. It could come to no consensus. It could come to no endorsement. It could come to another candidate. However, on the schedule and the bylaws, the way it's run, no questions would be allowed of candidates. No, even anything at most, maybe a 1-minute speech from candidates.
Paul?
Yeah.
Hate to interrupt you, but I noticed there's some chat in the chat box. Amy, I think, says, Paul, can we talk about this without the candidates in the forum?
Well,
I think we might want to let them go. They need to work tomorrow and
yes,
campaign. Should we have them, you know, anybody can stay on, but we could chit chat, but we should probably let them go, no?
Okay, well, I mean, because we're done with the candidates. If that's okay, Melissa can
And let's stop recording.
well, I do want to finish here though.
Okay, well, if I would say if the candidates want to jump off.
Yeah, thank you, candidates, for coming. I bid you a good night and good luck on Tuesday night, and going forward. Thank you so much for coming and answering questions. This is democracy. This is what democracy looks like. So thank you for participating tonight and in democracy. Thank you very much. But I do want to finish my thought there that LACDP didn't host this forum. I, just an individual member, had to do it. And the chair of LACDP, Mark Gonzalez, emailed candidates, discouraging them. I believe the word was strongly or highly, from participating tonight. That's not democracy. That's not what democracy looks like. Democracy is openness, transparency, accountability, asking questions, and being informed voters before a vote. I hope tonight helped people. Others hopefully will watch the next 48 hours. It's long, but it's thorough. We covered a lot of terrain tonight, and hopefully helped inform Democratic Party voters voting Tuesday night as to what they should do. We didn't have time tonight for a discussion. It's already 10:38 about a further discussion of the candidates in the room, or not in the room, and in the room, who were in the room, and the vote Tuesday. But I do hope that the conversation will continue on Facebook, online, yeah, in the public square and on Tuesday night, although Tuesday night discussion will be severely limited, unfortunately. That's not what democracy looks like or how it should be. So on that kind of depressing note, the uplifting note is that they came, they answered questions, you came, you got your questions asked, written, and if you came and raised your hand, you did. So thank you for participating. Thank you for recording. That's another thing. Chair Gonzalez was saying individual contact in his little email to candidates. That's what you should do to campaign. No, that's one of the things you should do. You should also sit in public recorded forums that can be shared publicly. You know, private phone calls in the state of California, two-party consent, unless you can't take. Of course, we got consent from the candidates here, but the public deserves to see this. Democrats deserve to see this. They deserve to see the candidates, you know, asked and answered questions. So that's why I hosted tonight. Thank you for coming. Thank you for participating, asking questions. It was, I think, a very informative, enlightening evening for me, and I hope it was for you too. And so we will see what happens Tuesday night. We will be in touch online. The conversation in democracy never ends, especially with the internet. But yes, thank you. If the candidates are, you can put your links in the chat box or your websites or whatever. They're probably pretty easy. I think the candidates may be gone. I don't know if Melissa kicked them out. But yeah, no, thank you, Ruth. Thank you, everyone, for coming. I think we can end the recording now. There we go. Okay, so the recording is now off. Yeah. Yes, thank you for coming, Eric. I don't know if the sheriff is still here, or Chief Rodriguez, but I thank them again for coming, and all of you. Yeah, feel free to share this. We'll put it up online.